Hi, welcome to Book Talks with Kiki. I'm Kiki. Let's talk about books. This is episode 2 in my physical TBR, takedown, read through. I don't know. I don't call this anything. You know what it is. We're reading through my physical TBR. If you'd like to watch the last episode, I will link it below, but we're going to do a little bit of recap by jumping into my spreadsheet that I'm using to track all of this. Here we are in my spreadsheet. Let's go ahead and go over the numbers. So I started with 46 books on my physical TBR so far. So in episode 1, I read 6 books, I DNF'd 1, and I didn't add any books to my collection last month, which means that my total TBR at the beginning of this video is 39. And that is such a great number. I love being below 40, but I have a slight confession to make. I wonder what it could be. So I went ahead and bought 5 books. So that 39 is no longer accurate. We've got to update the spreadsheet and get these books in there. Okay, I have added those 5 books to the bottom of my physical TBR tracking spreadsheet, which now means that my total TBR at the beginning of this video is 44 books, which means we've only made a progress of 2 books, technically, from my starting TBR 46. But very quickly going through this stack, I did get The Good Lord Bird by James McBride. Got this at Barnes & Noble. It was buy one, get one 50% off. So this was one that I had my eye on. I had to buy it because they also had My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. This was another one that's been on my TBR. I didn't really have any solid plans to read it anytime soon, but because these two were buy one, get one 50% off, I did that. Then I got Sour Cherry by Natalia Theodoridou. I apologize for that. I actually don't even know what this book is about, really, but this is just, I think it's a horror mystery thriller type of thing, which is not really my vibe, but I absolutely love the cover of this, and I read the first page and it sounded kind of interesting, so I just had to pick it up. When We Lost Our Heads by Heather O'Neill. So I read The Capital of Dreams by Heather O'Neill earlier this year, I think in January, February, and I absolutely loved it. So I've been having my eye on this for a very long time. I did have about like $30 on a Barnes & Noble gift card, so I knew some of this was going to be covered by that, and I just decided I'm tired of waiting, I'm going to pick this one up. And I felt like I had to buy Sour Cherry because it's not available through my library at all. So that's why I had to buy this one. This one, I have no excuse for. And then finally, this will make sense if you watched episode 1 of the series, but I've got Bloodmarked, which is the second book in the Legend-Born series by Tracy Deonn. I read the first book last month in my physical TBR challenge video, and I absolutely loved it. All right, so that's going to be the end of this mini book haul. It is now time to pick our priorities for the month of June. Last video, I originally picked 5 books and I ended up reading or getting through 7 books. There was 1 book that I DNF'd. But this month, I'm going to try to challenge myself, especially since I bought 5 new books this month already, and we've kind of gotten rid of a lot of the progress that we made last episode. I really want to try to challenge myself, and I think I have at least 8 books off of my physical TBR that I want to read. Okay, so the first book I'm going to try to read is this old big thing, The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. This is a fantasy about dragons, I think, and yeah, that's about all I know. I'm just very much intimidated by the size of this thing, but I need to make sure I'm hitting some of these big books so I don't have a backlog at the end of this project. The second book I'm going to try to read this month off of my physical TBR is Fool's Quest. This is the second book in the Fits in the Fool trilogy, which is the final trilogy in the realm of the Elderlings by Robin Hobb. I did read the first book in this trilogy in last month's episode, so we're going to actually try to finish this off. So I'm going to read both Fool's Quest and this mammoth Assassin's Fate, which is the third one. Okay, so Fool's Quest clocks in about 785 pages, and Assassin's Fate clocks in at 975 pages. And The Priory of the Orange Tree, I think, is at just about 800 pages. So yes, 3 really long books this month, and then some more mid-length books, and that's going to be Bloodmarked, the book that I just bought this month. Like I said, I read Legend-Born last month, and I really think I'm just going to blow through this. So we're going to get into Bloodmarked. And then because it's Pride Month, I did go ahead and pick up When the Tides Held the Moon. This is a book that I originally got through Aardvark. I got this in their May box, so it's only been on my TBR for about a month. The only thing I really know about it is that it is a gay romance between a merman and I think he's like a carpenter or like a metal worker, and he works at a freak show. And the merman is captured and put on display on this freak show. When the Tides Held the Moon by Vanessa Vida Kelly. And something that's really interesting, the reason I ended up buying this book through Aardvark as a physical copy, because I don't normally like romance, but it does have illustrations that the author did. So I thought it'd be really nice to have like a physical copy of all of these illustrations. That's like so cute and gorgeous. So this is about middle-sized length, 440-ish pages. So if I can get through all of those, because that is a lot of pages to read, I want to try to give myself a reward by reading a shorter book. This is The Assassination of Margaret Thatcher by Hilary Mantel. I'm a big Hilary Mantel fan. I've already read Wolf Hall and A Place of Greater Safety. This is a short story collection. I have no idea what the short story collections are about, but I know there is a short story called The Assassination of Margaret Thatcher. And this book is extremely short. It's only like 240 pages. So I think this will be a good palate cleanser from all of those long books and fantasy books that I will be getting to this month. Another book I'd like to get to is The Red Pony by John Steinbeck. So that is actually in this book, which is a collection of his short stories. This will be my fourth John Steinbeck book. I have no idea what The Red Pony is about. It was just one that I randomly picked. I literally did like eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and I landed on The Red Pony. Lastly, if I don't get to this one in June, I will definitely make this a priority in July, and that is going to be Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. This will actually be a reread for me. I read this in high school, and I am trying to revisit all of the assigned reading I had for my high school classes. I actually don't remember that much about this book, so I can't even tell you what it's about. I mean, I could read the flap, but like, I'm not going to spoil myself at this point. The only thing I remember is I think there was a hurricane at one point, and they were in the eye of the hurricane. And I think that had something to do with The Eyes Were Watching God. I am excited to revisit this though, because so far I've already read 2 books with this project, and I both enjoyed those much more than I remembered liking them the first time around. So I expect that I will like this quite a bit too. All right, so that is my TBR for the month of June. I've got a lot of long books. I got a lot of fantasy. I'm going to be finishing a series, and then we're going to be closing out the month with a bit more quicker reads, but some good classic authors in there. And I'll come back and update you after I finish each book. All right, I am back. I finished The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon, and well, I'm happy I finished it. Well, actually, no, I'm happy it's over. The spoiler-free review of this is it is not bad. I did not love it. I got very tired of it. It is too long. It is at times very boring. I think you could completely cut out one of the 4 main POVs in this book, at least one, perhaps 2. And about 10% in, I was thinking, this could be a 4-star read. 50% in, I was like 3.75 maybe. 55% of the way in, I was like a 3.5. 60% in, I was a 3.2. 70% in, I almost wanted to DNF this book. I am giving it a 3-star, and that is, in my opinion, a bit generous. It gets a 3-star because it's not bad, but my personal enjoyment of this book was something closer to like a 2-star read. I am trying to be a bit objective here and say that it's really not that bad. This book was just very hyped up, so I had high expectations for this book, and it's fine. It's like baby's first fantasy. That's kind of how I feel about this. It at times read very juvenile. It at times read very young adult. Okay, this book is very heavy, so I am going to put it down and then just very quickly tell you a little bit about what this book is. So we're in a world where there are dragons. There are lots of different types of dragons. There's wyverns, there's worms, there's dragons. So if you're really into like the nerd stuff of like, oh, it's got 4 legs, it's this. Oh, it's only got 2 legs, it's this. Oh, it's got wings. You would like all of the different types of dragon lore. And I thought some of the dragon lore was actually very interesting. The world building in this book, for the most part, I enjoyed it. Dragons are part of this world, and pretty much all of the main religions are based upon or have a foundation in this event that happened 1,000 years ago, where this giant big dragon called the Nameless One, think of him as like a Satan stand-in. He's pretty much the devil of this world, but he is a big dragon. He's evil incarnate. He brings plagues, death, all of this. He wants to take over the world and kill all the humans and pretty much destroy the planet. 1,000 years ago, he rose up. There was a big battle to save the world. He ended up being defeated, not killed, but he was contained. So we're 1,000 years from there, and we're now following 4 characters. I'm going to kind of mess up their names, but it's Eid, who is a handmaiden to the queen of the queendom of Innis. Her name is Sabron, something like that. I'm going to call her Sab. Then we have Lord Loth. He's been best friends with the queen for his entire life. So those are our main point of view characters in the West. And then we have 2 point of view characters in the east of this world, and that is Tane. She is attempting to become a dragon rider because the east still has dragons. They are a different breed than the dragons that made up the Nameless One's draconic army. So those dragons are all fire breathers, and the dragons of the east are all actually much more connected with water, but they fly and they're dragons and they are worshipped in the east. Every so often, they accept new humans to bond with them and ride with them, and Tane is trying to become one. The last POV that we have is an older man. His name is Dr. Nicholas Roos. He is actually originally from the West. He's from one of the kingdoms that makes up the Western continent, Metrodon, which I don't even think is anywhere near close to what it actually is, but I call it Metrodon. He was banished to this tiny, tiny island over in the east by actually Queen Sob 7 years ago when she was just about 18 or 19, because he had promised that he would find her a way to make her immortal, because he is an alchemist. And after drinking a lot and spending a lot of her money, she was like, okay, this guy is scamming me, and I now banish you to this small island over in the east, and he can never leave because the east and the west are very, very isolated from each other. The east, like I said, worships dragons, and over in the west, their religion splintered again based off of this incident that happened 1,000 years ago, this lore about this nameless one who rose. They hate all things dragon, and specifically in the queendom of Innis, they practice the 6 virtues. The Queendom of Innis and then I think 2 or 3 other countries in the West make up Virtuedom. They hate all things dragon, and they don't trust the East because they worship these dragon-like creatures. So they're very isolated. She banishes him over to this island. It's a very small island, and Dr. Nicholas Roos has been there for, like I said, 7 or 8 years at the start of this series. Those are your basic characters. That is the start of this book. So things I liked, I thought it was really interesting, the different religions that we experienced and how they all diverged from this single point of this cataclysmic Nameless One event 1,000 years ago, and how that myth has formed the basis of at least 3 or 4 different religions or interpretations of what happened. That was really interesting to me. I think that is something that is missing from a lot of fantasy that I read, like George R. R. Martin or Robin Hobb. They are very, very secular, and they make all of their characters very, very secular to the point where it's probably not completely realistic that all of these characters would not believe in their religions as much as they do. And so I liked in The Priory of the Orange Tree, religion is very important to many of these characters, and they call other people heretics. They judge other people based on their religion. I liked that piece of world building. I liked all of the different countries, but here's the thing. I think every book can be at least 5% shorter. This book could have been at least 100 pages shorter. It was like 805 pages. It could have been 700 at least. Like I mentioned at the beginning, there was one character I think you could have cut completely. I don't think you needed Nicholas. I could not tell you the point of him in this story, and he very much annoyed me, especially because I didn't think his arc went anywhere. There was a moment late into this book, chapter 69, I literally wrote it down because it was such an odd chapter to me. It made no sense. He goes through a really weird heel turn midway through this chapter. And again, I don't want to give any big spoilers, but I was like, why is this character here? Why is he important? You could have cut him completely. I'm going to be completely honest. You could have cut him completely. I do not know why Samantha Shannon thought that this character was vital to tell this story. He was not. He was not, and he was not even interesting. I don't think we know exactly how old. He said 50 or 60, I think. He was whiny, selfish, entitled, delusional, and that's great. All of those character flaws are valid in characters. That's why characters are interesting, because they have flaws, but I just didn't think she did it in a very interesting way. And again, it didn't go anywhere. So I didn't like him. I thought the pacing dragged. I think she started this story too early in all of these characters' arcs. Honestly, after the 60% point, the writing started to really grate on my nerves. I don't think I noticed it that much in the first third, because the first third I was just focused on getting the exposition and learning what the hell was going on in this world and finding footing. So I wasn't really paying attention to the actual quality of the writing. I was just more interested in, okay, how is this author introducing pieces of needed information? For the most part, I thought she did pretty well with it. She had a lot of characters and cultures and new worlds to juggle. That was the main focus of my mind while reading the first, half. And then I think once I understood everything and understood the characters, remembered them all better, the writing just started to annoy me. Like I said, it at times read very juvenile and young adult, very melodramatic. I think she was trying to be deep at points and it just came off way too forced. And I'm like, this is not a deep moment. And this line is trying too hard to be lyrical and it's really not. And I could just feel the effort in it. And it gave me a little bit of a cringe. It gave me a little bit of an ick. It was not bad writing. I want to be very clear, like this book was not bad and I can see why some people really, really love it. But for a book that was very hyped up and like a lot of people seemed to like, I was expecting better writing. The writing was mid. It was just mid. It was not bad, but it was not particularly great. It was very mid. So this is just a quote. And I think it's really hard to get a sense of the melodramaticism just from one quote. It just piled on, sentences after sentences that they're not bad one-off. They don't really bother me or raise any red flags one at a time. But then just when it keeps happening, I'm starting to be like, I'm annoyed. Quote, he had believed for too long in the delicate artifice of court. Now, the artfully placed leaves had blown away, revealing the shining jaws of the trap. Like, okay. Again, it's hard. I think when I read that, it sounds perfectly fine. But imagine that type of writing is in every paragraph. This is another quote. Caliba stopped. She was wrong. Like a cockroach wrapped in amber, preserved in the wrong time, yet Tane felt irresistibly drawn to her. Her blood called to this woman even as her flesh recoiled. First off, you used wrong twice, back to back. She was wrong, like a cockroach wrapped in amber, preserved in the wrong time. You're trying to explain to us how she is wrong, and then you end up using wrong in the image that you selected? In the simile? What? That is... Listen, that's not that big of a deal. That's just something the editor should have caught and been like, let's try to find a different image here. First off, I actually don't even think that metaphor works that well. The cockroach would have been preserved when it got caught in the amber. So was she preserved in the wrong state of her life at that moment when she was caught in the amber? Or is she now preserved in the amber in the wrong time? I'm going to get annoyed again. Again, this book is 800 pages long. So whatever, wrong was used twice in a row when a different word and probably a different image should have been selected instead. To me, that's more the editor not catching that than really all on the writer, but it's just giving you an example. There's a lot of people being saved out of nowhere by animals, animals specifically. Imagine that the eagles came every single time Sam and Frodo experienced any troubles on the road. The eagles came and said, hey, we'll take you to the next drop off. We'll take you to the next inn. That's what was going on here. And I also think that some of the setbacks these characters had while trying to build to their plan, to the climax, I think you didn't need all of them. There were a lot of, we've got everything we need. Oh no, now we don't. We've been attacked. We've lost this. We've lost that. We have to recapture this. You could have skipped some of this. Like you really could have just skipped some of this. So another thing about this book is that there are several mysteries throughout. I don't know how much of this is like good for the book for putting those clues there and making it easy to identify them. And if that was Samantha Shannon's goal, that we as the readers would figure it out at that point, even though the characters themselves aren't going to figure it out for another 150 pages. But I was figuring out some of these mysteries or some of these connections and what was going to happen 150 pages before. It was kind of frustrating. Like there's one mystery, and I'll just say this mystery is the cupbearer mystery. And once you have one piece of information about this, and then you have one scene with one character, you can immediately uncover the mystery. It's not hard at all. I locked in my theory on this on page 356, and on page 477, the character has the thought the first time of, oh, I wonder if it's this person. And I literally highlighted that thought and I said, yeah, no effing duh. I could guess some of these theories like right off the bat. They were very obvious. It just felt, like I said, it felt kind of juvenile. If I was anywhere between 15 and 20 and I had not already read Game of Thrones, like I probably would love this. Like I do think it is not without merit. It has its moments. I think for fantasy, especially if you're wanting to get into fantasy, this might be a really good book for you. But It was not worth 800 pages. It was not worth a week of me reading it. On Storygraph, it's a 4.26. I would not rate it anywhere near that high. And that's going to be the most I can say on the non-spoiler section. Feel free to skip this next part. This will contain spoilers because I just have to say this. I figured out that Igraine Crest was the cupbearer 130 pages before the first character had the thought. I think you could have figured it out even earlier because she's called the cupbearer, and we were already told before that her badge was the 2 cups. I think that clue was kind of buried nicely by Samantha Shannon because there are so many characters and all of these descendants of these, Knights of the Six Virtues. There's so many of them, and it's kind of hard to keep track of all of their sigils and everything at the start. So she definitely planted that clue right at the top, and then it's easy to kind of miss it. But what gave it away for me was a conversation that Sabran and Crest were having right after Sabran's husband, her first husband, whatever his name is, Augustine. His name is not Augustine, but I don't know whatever it was. Right after he was murdered, Crest says, "You must wed again." Sabran gazed at the window. "I do not see the need for it now." Crest let her smile fall this time. And I literally just said Crest is a cupbearer. It was so obvious. And it's annoying because fine, if Eid can't figure it out, if Sabran can't figure it out, this whole Nighthawk character who's supposed to be the super smart, cunning spy master who seems to see through everything else, he knows everything else, he can't figure out that Crest is the cupbearer. And then the book comes back to tell us, oh no, that is 100% accurate. He literally did not know. He really truly was doing his best couldn't figure out that the cupbearer was the lady with the cups. I know he had a suspicion, but he didn't do anything about it until too late. Again, you're telling me this character is very smart and they're missing something extremely obvious, which is why I do not think that Samantha Shannon meant for this to be so obvious. Obviously, she meant to plant seeds. I do not believe that she was expecting us to figure it out that early. And if she was, I'm sorry, it's a little bit bad storytelling because again, you're still telling me that these characters are smart and they're missing the obvious person. I got very, very tired of this book. Like I said, 70% of the way through, I wanted to DNF. It started to really drag right as it should have been picking up, the pace picked up. The whole big battle, I had no care about. I was not really connected to these characters. I already knew that Tane was going to survive, that Eid was going to survive, that Sabran was going to survive. Honestly, I expected Niclace to die. Maybe that was just my blind hope because I thought he was a useless, worthless character. I thought he was going to kill himself. He didn't even kill himself. He literally napped through the entire battle. So Eid had mortally wounded the Nameless One, quote, and Niclace had slept through the whole damn thing. The thought made a smile pull at the corner of his mouth. I highlighted that and I said, literally, why the did you matter then? The only thing that his actions had an impact on was Tane's story, right? Because he knew that she was the one who brought in whatever his name was, Soliard, and he ended up blackmailing her. He's one of the big reasons that her friend died, and she was caught in this lie. Her dragon got captured. She got demoted from the Sea Guard or whatever and had to go to Feather Island to be a scholar. He only mattered to her story. I do not think we needed his point of view. If he had just remained a figure that had been in her story as this person we don't see anything from, it would have been the same. It would have been better. And then the only other thing that he did is he told them that the Nameless One had a scale loose and they needed to fully wrench open the scale, and then that's where they needed to pierce him through the heart. Any number of other characters could have given us that exposition information. And that was part of chapter 69. That was the chapter I mentioned earlier in my spoiler-free discussion, where I was like, this is one of the worst chapters for a character I've ever read, because he twists himself 3 times in that chapter. He comes in, he's like, I'm gonna kill Eid, and I hate Queen Sab, and I'm gonna let her know how much I hate her because she banished me, because all I wanted to do was be in love with my partner. I didn't even do anything that bad. I'm like, boy, you're lucky you're alive. You literally scammed a queen, and all she did was banish you. Some of the politics in this world, I was like, people were acting like Sab was out of pocket for banishing him for that long. And she really wasn't. As a queen, she really wasn't. Sure, based on today's morals, that should not be a thing that can happen. But guess what? Any other court, they would have cut your head off. What the hell are you complaining about? So some of that was just annoying. He was so, woe is me, I'm the victim here. And at times the book was playing into that, saying isn't he ridiculous? But at other times it was treating him as a true victim. And I was like, he's not a victim here. It's sad that he lost his boyfriend and then he became an alcoholic. But you went to court and you promised the queen something, And then she gave you like 2 or 3 years to figure it out. You couldn't do it. And she said, get the F out of my country. What did you think was going to happen? You would not have survived any of the tutors' courts. Let me tell you that right now. They would have killed you within 3 months. Anyway, I'm getting worked up, but I really did not like the character of Nicholas. I did not think he worked in the story, as a character, as anything. He was literally pointless and useless. And then his whole like wrap-up chapter, I was like, I don't care about you or your dead lover. I'm really sorry. His whole like speech to the grave of his lover, Janot, or whatever his name is, I literally highlighted it. I said, who cares? Who cares? Not me. All right, so moving away from Nicholas for now. The politics in this book are a little weird. I'm just sometimes a little bit struggling with what Samantha Shannon is trying to say about kings and queens and rulers and magical bloodlines and destinies and things like that. I'm trying to figure some of that out still. So the 6 virtues is based on this quote unquote lie about the saint Sir Gilead or whatever his name is, Galen. He becomes the saint of this pretty much made up religion that he creates, and he mythologizes himself, and he lies that he was the one to kill the Nameless One instead of Queen Cleolind, who is the kind of founding figure of the religion for Eid and her people, and the priory of the Orange Tree. That's the founding there. And then for the Queendom of Innis, it's this Sir Gallion, and he was the one to kill the Nameless One with this magical sword. Queen Sab figures out that pretty much the entire foundation of her religion is false. It is the thing that keeps her in power, because part of their religion was that as long as their bloodline sat on the throne, the Nameless One could never rise. And so once she figures out that some of these things that she's been told are lies, she feels like all this guilt, I guess. And at the end, she says, quote, I will tell my people the truth about Galen, about Cleolind. There will be a great reformation of virtudom. It will be very difficult. There will be years of denial, of anger, but it must be done. And I'm like, but must it though? Like, I think part of my issue is that some of the religions are being treated as real and valid and the correct religion, and the other one is treated as the false one. And not only is it false, it is so immoral that this lie about Sir Galen and Queen Ciliad and whoever defeated the Nameless One the first time around, it is so unethical that this lie continue, that it would be better to completely upend an entire religion of, we don't really get a good number, but of like 3 countries worth of people that have been practicing this religion for 1,000 years. It would be better to do that than to just like let them keep believing in their stupid religion. I'm going to be honest, I don't quite get that. I'm like, we know what happens during religious reformations. Bad things. Lots of people die. Lots of people are persecuted. I know in this book, they like literally decided that heretics no longer exist in this country. So the Queendom of Innis used to say that anyone who was not one of the practitioners of the 6 virtues was a heretic. And this queen is now like, we're no longer going to call those people heretics. We're going to welcome all religions here. And I'm just like, okay. I get that she is a changed woman now, and she is going to give up her throne in 10 years. She can no longer have children, so like her line cannot continue anyway, so she doesn't really have anything like to lose, except there is the stability of a realm to consider. And I'm just struggling with the moral choice of, I'm going to tell this entire country the truth about this religion. And I'm like, is it really worth it? Like, is that really that good of a plan? And Eid's sitting there like, yes, she's so brave for doing this, and this is the right thing to do. And I'm like, is it really the right thing to do though? I'm not saying continue to lie to them. I'm not saying like continue to force this religion down everyone's throat. I think the steps that she's already taking to no longer burn people at the stakes for being heretics is very good. But I'm like, you were really going to just think that we're going to change millions of people's religion overnight? Or over 10 years or whatever, and it's going to be a good time? She literally says, it will be very difficult. There will be years of denial, of anger. There's going to be years of death and killing and murder and war. People are not going to give up their religions just like that. That's not how it happens, okay? That annoyed me. The whole battle annoyed me. I did not give a dang about this stupid battle. Like I said, I knew that none of the characters were going to die. I was hoping Nicholas was going to die. He didn't die. Loth didn't die. Loth's sister didn't die. Loth's sister's husband or husband-to-be didn't die. I was like, great. It's just whatever. And then the last effing paragraph. What the hell was that? So this is Ede on a boat back to the south. The boat that she's on is this privateer who we met like 2 or 3 other times before, and he is still not a character at all. He's just a man who says things, but he has no real character. I don't know how you make a pirate, a privateer, boring as all hell, but you've done it with this character. I don't even know his stupid name, but he is the perhaps real father of Queen Sab. And so Ede makes some insinuations about, hey, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, are you Queen Sab's father? Because there's been some rumors. And he says, quote, some truths are safest buried, some castles best kept in the sky. There's promise in tales that are yet to be spoken, in the shadow realm known only to the few. You ought to know, Ede, you whose secrets will one day be a song. With the faintest smile, Ede cast her gaze toward the stars. One day, perhaps, she said, but not today. And that's the end of the effing book. And I'm like, is that supposed to be deep? Is that supposed to be satisfactory ending? Is that supposed to make me go, wow, what the hell did that man just say? He just said words. He didn't say anything deep or meaningful or have any point. I'm getting heated and I'm starting to be like, should this book be rated lower than 3 stars? So I'm going to have to stop here. I have other books that I need to read and review in this video. I cannot just keep bashing on this book. And obviously I had a lot of problems with it. My personal enjoyment of this book, like I said, is closer to a 2-star. I think there are enough more objective things to keep this at a 3-star, but as I'm talking about it, that honestly might change. And I fear that when I rewatch this and I edit this video, I'm going to start hating this book even more. So I'm glad it's over. War is over. So next up on my list is Fool's Quest, which is the second book in the Fits in the Fool trilogy by Robin Hobb, part of the Realm of the Elderlings. This is my next book from my physical TBR, technically, but before I finish that, I will be starting Summer Fun by Jeanne Thornton. So this is actually a book that I need to read for a book club, and in my first episode of the series, I mentioned that physical books that I buy that are part of book clubs, I will not be including on this list because I already have a deadline and motivation to read them. But I might come back and talk to you about this book if, I have a lot of strong feelings about it, if I really liked it. I actually don't really know what it's about, but I think it has some trans representation. I think it's like a trans love story. This one is about 410 pages. So we do meet on this in a week and a half. I have to get to this one before I get to Fool's Quest, but I'll give you an update when I finish one of these books. All right, I have finished some more books, so let's talk about them. I want to briefly talk about Summer Fun by Jeanne Thornton because this book is about the trans identity and trans experience. Our main character in this book is Gayla, a trans woman who is obsessed with this very popular band from the 1960s, early 70s, and this book takes place in 2009. So it's been quite a while since their heyday, but this book is about both her experience and her life as a trans woman, but also about her obsession and her interest with one of the band members of the Get Happies, which is the band, specifically the member B. And that's really the only name that we know this band member by, B. Let's see if I can show you. In the book, it's actually written B with a bunch of dash. I don't even know if I'm showing you the right thing, but it says right there, Dear B. Dear B, and then it's dashed out. So as you can see, this is an epistolary novel where everything is kind of written in the form of a letter, although really the letters read more like diary entries of our main character, Gayla. And so Gayla starts every chapter with Dear B. What's interesting about this book is the chapters alternate between her actual life in the present day in 2009, the things that she's going through and the relationships that she has, telling B about those experiences. And then every other chapter will actually focus on B, and we slip into second person. Gayla will tell B about their own life. You see this right from the start in the prologue. Dear B, money, and lots of it, has been spent on cultivating this dog. That much is clear from the moment you bend aside the landscape bushes that line the front porch of your childhood home in Hawthorne, California, revealing the hollow space where it's crawled to die. So Gayla will write to B about B's own life in very specific detail. So as the reader, you're a bit like, okay, how does Gala know this about B, or at the very least know these very specific details? That's like the really interesting thing about this book. Overall, I would give this book probably a 3 to 3.25 stars. I really enjoyed reading this book for the themes on trans identity and trans experience, and the writing was not bad in any way, shape, or form. It just was not very captivating for me. There was not a lot of times where I ended a chapter and said, wow, I cannot wait to read more about this, or wow, I cannot wait to find out what happens. I never experienced that moment. If I had not been reading this for a book club, I probably would have DNF'd somewhere around 50%. I liked the first 130 pages. Like I said, I was never super invested, but I was interested to see where this goes. But then as the book continued, I just got more and more bogged down by some of the writing choices and the details. I don't really know how else to describe it other than there's just a lot of detail in this book about things that I particularly did not think were needed or were that interesting. Also, sorry for the lighting change. I don't know if this is better or worse, but we're just going to try it. And then because Gala is obsessed with this band, there is a lot of time spent on trying to describe the music that the band is making. And I like music, but I am not very knowledgeable about music, and I don't particularly like to read about how music is described. So I have a couple of examples of this. Quote, "Yet slowly, wordlessly, they get better, syllables melting like fudge over the cold carved scoop of mono production you and Midnight Automotive have put to tape, their voices, ungrounded by Tom's nasal bass, fluttering from track to track, spreading their wings in colors sunburst at the peak of ascending strings, a staccato series of ahs that ride a wave of cushioning harmonica foam, moaning mid-range ecstasies as honor guard for the drums and guitars trading off as they move down in fifths to the outro of track 8. It's not a bad sentence. It's just I do not care to read about music being described to me in this detail. And again, if this was a one-off, fine, but it's not. It happens a lot. So some of that stuff for me personally bogged it down. It made it very slow. So the majority of the time I did like the writing. There was lots of good bits of writing here. I just think this book is too long. It's 410 pages. This could have been at least 350 pages, if not less. I very much disliked the ending. This book sets up multiple, not really mysteries, but questions. And it had me thinking about, oh, where are we going to end this? How are we going to end this and wrap all of these things up? And this book says, I don't know. I'm not going to tell you. We're not going to wrap any of it up. And I was very annoyed by that. I know it's a choice by the author, and I'm sure it has a great, literary merit in that choice. But as a reader, it was frustrating. I was expecting some type of conclusion, some type of answers, some type of real cathartic emotional release, and this book gave me none of it. I would still kind of recommend this book if you really like music, or if you really want a book that has a trans female main character and you're just interested in any book that deals with the trans experience. I read Stag Dance by Tori Peters earlier this year, and that book deals a lot with trans themes. One of the main themes that book deals with is this idea that trans women have to love and support other trans women, even if they actually hate them, because if they don't, no one else will. So it's like, if we don't love ourselves, who else is going to love us? And this book definitely has that theme. I personally liked the theme and how it was explored more in Stag Dance than in this one, but I think I could appreciate what was in this book better because I read Stag Dance first. Like I said, it's really not a bad book. It's not particularly great in my personal opinion, but I think I'm in the minority here. I've seen a lot of reviews on this book on Storygraph, and people seem to really love and connect with it. I wish I could have had that experience. I was just kind of left annoyed by the writing, that I think it closed me off to the little emotional beats that this book did have. I did think I was most engaged with the chapters where we were focusing on Bee's life back in the 1960s. I found those the most engaging. And for the most part, I kind of like how Bee's story is revealed and wrapped up. It's more than connecting Gala's stories with Bee. There's definitely something here in the book about how these two stories combine and why we have this Gala character knowing all of these details about Bee's life that there's really no way she should be able to know. There's definitely stuff there. This touches a little bit on magical realism elements, but at the end of the day, there just was not enough for me to really love it. Okay, so after summer fun, I went ahead and picked up Fool's Quest by Robin Hobb. This is the second book in the Fits in the Fool trilogy, which means it is the penultimate book in the entire Realm of the Elderling series. I read the first book in this trilogy in episode 1, Fool's Assassin, and gave that one 5 stars. Fool's Quest, I think, is an even stronger book when it just comes to like narrative and plotting and actually having action in it. Fool's Assassin was super slow, slice of life. Practically nothing of real importance happened for 400 pages and I ate it up. I loved every second of it. This one definitely had some more action, some more pacing, plot, movement, character development, character tension, and interactions. One of my wishes reading Fool's Assassin was that Fitz would interact more with some of the characters that we had met on previous trilogies that were main important characters. And this book definitely delivers on that want, that desire. He meets up with a lot of characters, both from previous Fitz POV trilogies and Live Ship Traders and Rainwild Chronicles. So this book finally kind of paid off that promise that's been building for 14 books. I do think I enjoyed this one slightly less than I enjoyed Fool's Assassin, if only because this book is a bit darker and that just did impact my own personal enjoyment of it. It's not bad. It's not wrong of her to discuss these topics in any way. Just it was very heavy for me to read. And I would say that one of my quibbles with Hobb is the prevalence of sexual assault and rape in her books. Again, I don't think it's problematic. I'm not trying to cancel any author. She really handles, those storylines and I think those characters with a lot of, empathy, sympathy. I think she handles it well. I just think overall that there is a prevalence in it throughout all of her Realm of the Elderlings books that I don't particularly think is always necessary. And this book deals a lot with some sexual assaults and rapes. Never directly on page, but it is mentioned multiple times. There are traumatized characters in this book because of sexual assault, and it's just given a lot of page time. That's just something to be aware of. If you're getting this far into Realm of the Elderlings, you already know that those things exist in this world and the way that she usually handles them. My biggest issue with her has always been in Ship of Destiny, which is the last book in the Live Ship Traders trilogy. This handles the assault, I think, better than that book did, for my personal opinion, just how it impacted characters and character arcs. But it is a very big part of this book, and like I said, it was a little bit hard to get through. Which, it should be. We're reading about characters being assaulted. It should be hard for us to get through, and it should have weight to it. So I definitely appreciate that. And like I said, I'm not trying to cancel her. It's not like she's overly grotesque depictions of women being hurt. I just think overall it's something that she has a tendency towards that I don't always appreciate. But anyway, if you have not started Realm of the Elderlings, please go read it. You got to start with Assassin's Apprentice. I would recommend Realm of the Elderlings even for people who don't love fantasy, who are willing to give it a try, but really, really, really appreciate character work. If you just love finding interesting characters and just spending a lot of time with them and living in their world, Robin Hobb is your girl. This book ends on 2 cliffhangers, and I will be getting to Assassin's Fate soon. But before we get to Assassin's Fate, there are 2 books I want to try to read first. So I either want to read The Red Pony by John Steinbeck or Bloodmarked by Tracy Deonn. I have a better idea of what I'm going to get with Bloodmarked because I read Legendborn last month. I actually have no idea what the heck The Red Pony is about. This is just part of my attempt to read all of John Steinbeck's works. All right, y'all, I am back, and I did end up reading Bloodmarked by Tracy Deonn, book 2 in the Legendborn cycle. This is just a continuation of Brie Matthews, our main character story from Legendborn. Go watch my episode 1 if you want a kind of in-depth review and really a raving review of the series. Overall, I very much still enjoy the series. I did like book 2 a little bit less than I liked book 1, but it wasn't bad by any stretch of the imagination. Very briefly, to kind of set up a little bit of context for this review, which is going to be spoiler free, the Legendborn cycle tells a story of, like I said, Brie Matthews, who is a 16-year-old girl going to an early college program on University of North Carolina's Chapel Hill campus, and she gets involved pretty much right away with this secret society, this secret club that operates on the campus and really around the globe, and they are demon hunters. But the foundation of this secret society, this order, and all of their magic is actually based in Arthurian legends and myths. So that is the world in which we inhabit. My favorite parts of this book were actually the first 10 to 15%. I really enjoyed that bit. I liked how the politics were expanded and handled in that first section. Brie kind of has to go toe-to-toe with some older members of the order that have a lot of institutional power. There is a lot of politics going on because she herself has to have a certain amount of respect given to her, but they don't necessarily like that they have to give her that respect. And there's definitely some kind of eye-opening moments for Bree where she had an idea of how her interactions with certain members of this order were going to go. And in actuality, not what happens at all. So I liked the politics of that. I liked the new characters introduced in that world, or I didn't necessarily like them, but I thought they were interesting and a good kind of bouncing off point for Bree. As we got further along, I started to enjoy it a little bit less. Like I said, it's nothing bad. There's a lot of action in this book, which is fine. I just don't necessarily read books for big action fights and battles with demons. But that is just like something you have to accept going into this book. But that just personally is not like what I was the most interested in. I was also a little bit, not frustrated, but frustrated that one of the main characters in book one is barely involved in this book. I suspected a little bit that was going to be the case, but he really does not come around until like the last 20 pages. And while there are a few beats with him, I would say his total page time is less than 60 pages. And while I understand why Tracy Deonn had to do this, because it's part of just this tension and this, I'm going to just say a little bit of a love triangle going on, I understand why she had to separate some of these characters from each other for other plot points to happen. I really liked all three of these characters together. So having two be on this mission and one be away from them just didn't really work for me. And it seems like that might be something that continues on into book three based on how this book ends. We're going to have another kind of fracturing of these three core characters that really made up the heart of the first book for me. Something I did think about is like, she's supposed to be at school, and I swear there's not a single mention of anything related to school beyond one time. There was like one time where she's like, I went to class, and that's it. And maybe I missed it. I totally could have missed it. I assume they were on break. I think perhaps winter break for the majority of this book, but it was very annoying to me. If you're going to have a book with school-age children, I understand school is not the most exciting thing. I don't need to hear her lectures. I don't need to hear all of the homework she has or be with her while she does the homework, but I need to hear that she has homework. I need to hear her thinking, if I fail this class, my dad is going to come and take me out of this school, and then I won't be able to complete my secret missions with my secret society. Like, I need to hear that, because there was no real world pressures going on with them, which to me, I was just like, why aren't you dealing with the real world pressures that Bree would have as a 16-year-old high school student? And while I understand why she's not even in the dorms anymore for the story, and like why it would make sense in this world for her to no longer be housed in student housing, I think losing any connection that Bree has to the real world, I don't know if it's quite a mistake, but it's something that I think could have been played with a lot more in the second book. Similarly, she calls and talks to her father maybe once or twice in this book. And she does say to him, I might not be able to call you for a little bit, but I'm just going to be busy with schoolwork. And he's like, okay, that's great. But it seems like she went weeks without talking to him. And again, maybe it wasn't exactly weeks. The timeline in this could have been a bit more condensed, but there were definitely times where she would wake up and they'd be like, you've been out for 3 days. And I'm like, so that's 3 days on top of the already 3-day road trip. Like, when is she going to talk to her father? And her relationship with her dad was supposed to be a very big, important emotional beat. So there were definitely some threads I think that Tracy Deonn dropped a little bit in this book. How much of it was intentional and she was just like, we're just going to lampshade it and continue on because we don't have the time or the pages to spare. But this is a 566 page book. She could have found some room and some time to think about these things, in my personal opinion. I think we could have done with 1 or 2 less demon battles, 1 or 2 less chapters in some of these demon-heavy, lore-heavy moments, and given that time to some of like Bree's real life and real world connections. And Bree's real world connections are important because this book deals with real world themes of systemic racism. In this book, they go to, and this is not a huge, I don't think this is a huge spoiler. In this book, they spend time at a former slave plantation in the South. And that is very heavily talked about, the horrors that happened on this plantation and why it was important. So this book already deals with real world heavy topics. And I really enjoyed all of that. I think that's great. That is a key reason that Tracy Deonn wants to write this book is to talk about these topics and to give voice to some of the intergenerational trauma that Black people, especially Black young girls, go through and experience. And she's heavily drawing inspiration from her own real life experiences. So all of that is great. And I'm like, so if we're dealing with these real world heavy topics, let's get a shout out to schoolwork, like let's just get a shout out to schoolwork. Let's give a call to dad, or at the very least, if Bree cannot do school, let's get an email about how she's failing her classes. Let's get her dad calling her constantly, being like, pick up the phone, pick up the phone, pick up the phone. I'm a little confused about the father that we saw in book 1, just not caring at all about not hearing from his daughter, because he was a bit more active and a bit more proactive in reaching out to Bree than we saw in this book. But there's no thought about, hey, my father's going to come pick me up in 3 days at UNC Chapel Hill to take me home for the winter break. So I'm sitting here and I'm like, where exactly in this semester at school are we, and where does her father think she is? I had a couple more like just structural and plot story issues with this installment than I did with the previous one, but overall it's still very good. I'm still very excited to continue the series. I will probably be reading the 3rd book in the series, Oathbound, next month, although I don't currently own that one physically, and I don't have any plans to buy it physically simply because right now it's only available in hardback. And if I have 2 paperbacks, I'm not going to go buy a hardback, but I will be reading it through my library. I already am on the wait list. I think I only have a couple more weeks until I can check that book out. I'm still trying to figure out exactly where I want to rate Bloodmarked. I think it's gonna land, at about a 4 stars, but I'm still really high on this series. I think the way Tracy Deonn just approaches this story, it's just a good, fun time. It's a good story. The characters are compelling, and she's not just telling you a demon hunting story. Like I said, she is really infusing this story with important themes and ideas and moments of realization for Bree that the reader can also take things back from, which I appreciate. All right, so next book on the docket is going to be The Red Pony by John Steinbeck. Obviously, I have a physical copy of this book, but it is also available for me to check out through my library, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'll let you know what I think. All right, it is the next day, and I have now finished The Red Pony by John Steinbeck. This is a very short 97-page novella short story, and this, like I said, is part of my quest to read as much as I can of John Steinbeck's, and this is the 4th work of his that I've read, and I'm not going to hold this book up the entire time. We're talking about The Red Pony. The other John Steinbeck works I've read are East of Eden, The Pearl, which is another short story, and then his Acts of King Arthur and his Noble Knights book. The Red Pony is going to be my 2nd favorite Steinbeck work to date, under East of Eden, above The Pearl, and way above the Acts of King Arthur. That book I actually technically DNF'd. I read 200 out of the 300 pages and I DNF'd at that point. I will probably circle back to completing that one, but let me just tell you, The Red Pony is much, much better than the Acts of King Arthur. I had no idea what this novella was about before I picked it up. I didn't really care what it was about. I also had no idea what The Pearl was about before I picked that up, so that's just how I like going into the short stories of John Steinbeck as much as I can. Some of his more famous works like Of Grapes of Wrath and Of Mice and Men, even though I haven't read those, I do kind of know what those are about or have a better idea. But The Red Pony is a coming of age story for this young 10-year-old boy named Jody. And Jody lives in California on a ranch in the Salinas Valley. And this is a kind of episodic novella. There are 4 main sections to this short story, and each one centers around a specific event or person or an animal in Jody's life. And we kind of see the experiences that will really shape who he will become. We don't actually get to follow him all the way to adulthood. It really just takes place over a year and a half. But these are obviously going to be moments in his life that come to define him. That's why I kind of say it's a coming of age, although we don't really quite get the end product of him. He's still learning and growing. It's really just important moments in his life over this, like I said, 1.5 to 2 year time period on his father's ranch in California. It's a very limited cast of characters. Jody is the main character and our main POV. Then there is his father, Carl Tiflin, his mother, Mrs. Tiflin, and Billy Buck, who is the only other permanent member of this ranch. He is a farmhand. We also get an appearance by Jody's grandfather. Then there's also the character of Gaetano, who is an older man stranger who visits the ranch for one of these sections. That's all of the characters, at least all of the human characters, and really the main important characters. So because this book is, like I said, episodic, and there are just 4 specific sections and moments, I won't get much into the details of what those 4 moments actually are. There definitely is a section devoted to the Red Pony, but don't expect 97 pages devoted to just a horse. I'll tell you that right now. That's not how this book goes. But I actually really liked this. When I read The Pearl, I liked that one too. I think I gave that one like a 3.75. I really liked the ending of The Pearl. I thought it was a super strong ending, but the actual themes and writing didn't connect with me maybe as much as I was expecting or hoping. So then I came into this one probably with a little bit lower expectations, and I ended up really liking this. I might have to give this one like a 4.25 or 4.5 stars, somewhere around there. Interestingly enough, while my favorite part of The Pearl was the ending, I actually hated the ending of this book. I don't think this book actually gives us an ending at all. I got to the last sentence and I said, wait, they forgot to print like the last 5 pages of this book. And I was like, nope, that's just how it ends. I've kind of since come around to the ending because I just kind of justified it and how it would fit to the other themes that I was taking from the book. But yeah, so the ending lost me a little bit, but I still really liked the overall message. I actually ended up reading this book on Father's Day, and perhaps I should have expected this just based off of East of Eden, but Steinbeck and his father and son relationships, they are written so simple. Like, his writing is so incredibly simple. It actually drives me crazy because I'm reading his words and I'm like, what about this sentence is so good? What about this sentence makes me think and hits me harder than most other prose I've ever read? I don't know what it is. There's definitely someone who's smarter than me who really understands the construction of the English language and could probably point out exactly how he uses nouns and verbs and all of these things and images perfectly. But when you're reading it, it just reads so simple that it allows you to just really focus on the emotional impact that these words have. And there's a kind of complicated and complex father-son relationship. We don't get too in the weeds of exactly what went on between Jody and his father. We just get hints. We don't actually see too much of the terrible behavior from the father to the son, but Steinbeck totally 100% convinces you that this is a father who has done emotional and physical harm to his son. And Jody is trying to grapple with that and is trying to understand that and all of these other experiences that are happening to him while he's still just a 10-year-old boy and is living a very sheltered life on this rural California farm. And I don't know if it's just because it's Pride Month that I was like thinking about this, but I am convinced that you could do a pretty well evidenced and well supported queer reading of this text. Like, I do not believe in any way, shape, or form that Steinbeck was trying to write Jody as queer. I will say this as a disclaimer. I don't know anything about Steinbeck's personal life. If he's a terrible man, I apologize for him. I really don't know. Okay, I'm not trying to say that these were his values or anything, but you could totally do a close reading of this book, at least of like half of this book, as Jody being queer. Again, I think this goes a little bit to his relationship with his father, of how disappointed his father is in him and how scared Jody is of living up to that disappointment or giving him another thing to berate him for. But there's this quote, and this scene takes place when Jody is preparing to sit on his red pony for the first time. It would be the first time that the pony has experienced someone like on his saddle, on his back. Jody is preparing for this moment because there's a big chance that the horse might buck him off. And Billy Buck and his father are telling him, don't grab the saddle horn, I guess, for whatever reason. I'm not a horseman. I don't know why, but he's ruminating on this idea of, okay, I need to make sure that I'm not grabbing the saddle horn. I need to play with my hat or something, look like a cowboy, play with my hat. And there's this quote: if he kept his hands thus busy, he couldn't grab the horn if he felt himself going off. He didn't like to think of what would happen if he did grab the horn. Perhaps his father and Billy Buck would never speak to him again. They would be so ashamed. The news would get about and his mother would be ashamed too. And in the schoolyard, it was too awful to contemplate. Now, obviously, that is just a young boy kind of building up anxiety and worries to a point that's not natural, right? It's not shameful to grab the horn, right? But he's very concerned about, humiliation. Like, what if I get bucked off and I don't live up to this kind of idea of a man to my father? My mother's going to know, she's going to be ashamed of me. It's going to spread everywhere. Obviously, these are the insecurities and fears of, like I said, a 10-year-old boy. But I highlighted that and I just thought that was an interesting metaphor for coming out in general, especially this idea of a saddle horn. I don't want to get too Freud, but as a Game of Thrones fan, I know any time that a sword is mentioned in literature, it's phallic. It's a dick, okay? Let's be honest. So I read that with the saddle horn and I was like, is that not also pretty phallic? He doesn't want to grab a saddle horn because he's scared how everyone will react and he feels ashamed to be thinking about this. Again, is it a bit of a stretch? Yes, but I could not help connecting those dots. Like I said, I don't think it's what Steinbeck intended. This is obviously mainly just supposed to show the insecurities of a young boy so that we can kind of empathize and sympathize with him. And I did really like this moment because I'm just like, I've had that thought too. Everyone's going to know that I made this small one screw up and it's going to like ruin my life forever. But also, you could totally do a queer reading of this. Again, this related to how he interacts with his father overall through this book. Maybe I'm completely off base and that's totally fine, but I thought the way that Jody and his father's relationship was written could be very similar to the relationship between a father and a son, where the father has suspicions about the son being gay and not liking that and wanting to toughen him up and things like that. So even though that sounds kind of ridiculous, that is an example of what Steinbeck's writing does to me. That whole paragraph is extremely simple, right? The words are simple. There's nothing particularly incredible about it, but it struck me. And there's something about the way that it just invites further analysis. There's another scene later in the book where Jody is talking to man I mentioned, Gaetano. He is an old man and a stranger to the family. He came to the ranch because he said, long ago, my father and I used to live on lands just across like the way, and I've come back here to die. And everyone's like, well, you can't stay here, man. We'll let you stay for the night, but you need to go back to your own family. Like, we're not going to take care of you for however long. He's like, no, I've come here to die. This is where I was born. I've come here to die. Gaetano has a sword with him, and Jody sees him pull it out, and Jody's very curious about this. He's very interested in the sword. He thinks it's so cool. So he asks him, like, where did you get it? Where did it come from? Now Gaetano regarded him profoundly, as though he pondered. I got it from my father. Well, where'd he get it? Gaetano looked down at the long deerskin parcel in his hand. I don't know. Didn't he ever tell you? No. Well, what do you do with it? Gaetano looked slightly surprised. Nothing. I just keep it. Again, I feel like I'm being impressed by almost like literature 101. This is a very simple metaphor. This is just this idea of the things that fathers pass down to their sons and how the sons carry that on. The sons might not understand why their father is this way. They don't know where they got the weapon from, but now the weapon is theirs and they have to sit with it, and they will probably pass it on to their sons, so on and so forth. It's a very simple exchange, but the work that Steinbeck did earlier in the novel of the father and son relationship between Jody and his father is what allowed me to kind of immediately think about the deeper ramification of such a simple exchange. Again, I feel like someone's going to watch this and be like, yeah, that's just simple metaphor literature 101. And while I agree with you, I just think Steinbeck does it really, really well. Okay, it works for me. I know it's like super basic or whatever to like Steinbeck, but I really like Steinbeck's writing. It just works for me. I was not expecting to have so many layers that I felt like I could talk about with this book for such a short book. I've already been talking about this for how long exactly? And it's 97 pages. And there's a lot of quotes that I haven't even talked about. The way that he describes nature and the mountains especially. I experienced that with East of Eden, and just again here, he can write nature so well, and the way that people love their homes so extremely well. It moves me so much. There's so much more I could be talking about with this book that I was just super impressed about how much he got in 97 pages. And I really, like I said, I really enjoyed it. I was kind of not expecting this at all. Like I said, the Pearl was kind of a middling response for me. I appreciated what he was doing with it, but I didn't really like it. I haven't really thought much about it since, but I've been thinking about The Red Pony all day since I finished reading it. I've just been continuing to think about Jody and his story. Although I think some people are going to be surprised and perhaps not love how disjointed these sections are. Obviously it worked for me and I really loved it. That's going to be it for this update. I am going to start Assassin's Fate now, which is the final book in the Realm of the Elderling series. So you'll see me when I'm done. Hi, welcome back. Okay, I have now finished this beast, Assassin's Fate by Robin Hobb. This book was 975 pages, and not only that, it was the last book in a 16-book series, not to mention the novellas, which yes, I still do need to read, or there's like one collection of short stories or something I still need to read for this, but it is the last book of 16 books. I just finished it. So, and you know what? We're going to talk spoilers. So I will put a timestamp above. There's also going to be timestamps in the description box down below. So please skip this if you don't want to be spoiled for anything about not just this book, but the entire Realm of the Elderling series. Skip it. All right. I'm going to give you. Okay. Now that the losers are gone, we can talk. Y'all, what an ending. I'm still kind of trying to figure out all my thoughts. At the start, I just want to briefly talk about a critique or a certain feeling I've had about these books pretty much since the second book in the series. Now, these books are fantastic. Robin Hobb is an excellent writer. I will say that sometimes I feel the weight of the author's hand in the story a bit more than I would like. And this is a little bit hard to explain because obviously all stories are created by authors. Everything in a story is hand-selected by an author and put there for a reason, and at the end of the day, the author is always controlling the plot. So I obviously understand that. But I will say there are times throughout the entire series where I could feel that this was Robin Hobb forcing these characters into a certain direction by just creating situations in which there was only one way to go. Again, I know that sounds silly, but for instance, let's take the kind of inciting incident of this entire trilogy, which is when, again, this is spoilers, people, so please don't come crying to me if I tell you a spoiler. Please skip this part. When Fitz attacks the fool, which he does not realize is a fool at the time, he attacks the fool and stabs him in the belly like 7 times, something ridiculous where it's like no one should have survived this, but he stabs him in the belly 7 times because he saw the fool in this beggar garb holding his child. He wasn't hurting his child, but Fitz did not stop to think about that and just immediately went to kill mode. And yes, that is not an unrealistic thing for Fitz to do, although Fitz is now in this book 60 years old. He's talked about how he's slower on the draw. He's talked about how he is not as hot-headed and anything like that. So he immediately jumps to attempting to kill this man. And I guess there are potentially some excuses you could make. Maybe it was some of the servants or Vindalar doing things, or he was already kind of dealing with a lot of adrenaline from his earlier beating up of that dog seller and that dog abuser. So there's a lot of excuses you can make for his character about why he makes this choice. But at the end of the day, I know the reason he made this choice is because Hobb needed to separate Fitz and Bee so that Bee could be kidnapped. And there was just very little reason that Fitz would leave Bee unprotected, especially in the care of Lant and Shun, who he had just said, these people are terrible at taking care of children. I do not trust them at all. So she needed to introduce a dire enough circumstance to have Fitz and Bee separated. And then she also wanted to bring the fool back into the story. But she also needed the fool in such an incoherent and unhealthy state that he could not tell Fitz, hey, I just grabbed someone I think might be the unexpected son. And is anyone around here? Oh, that's your daughter? Oh, wait, your daughter might be my daughter. We did some weird magical empreg thing, which I did like the magical empreg. That was kind of funny. She had to create these circumstances in which Fitz was occupied with the fool, far away from Bee, and that Fitz had no idea about the true danger of the situation. Obviously, it's a book. Everything is manufactured. Every plot is a contrivance so the author can tell the certain story that they want. That one choice, that one instance is the thing that kicks off the rest of this series. And again, that's called a book. That's called a plot. I know there are people saying that. I'm just saying that there were just times throughout the series, throughout all 16 books, where I could just feel that this was Robin Hobb tipping the scales to a certain direction that I didn't necessarily think was the most natural choice or situation for a character. And often these points in her story just go to giving a lot of trauma to a character, to be honest. I had the same feeling back in the 3rd book of the first trilogy, Assassin's Quest, when Burrich leaves Fitz for a couple days in their cabin, and Fitz gets attacked by the Forged One, and the Forged One has his shirt or with the pin from King Shrewd on, and Fitz manages to kill the Forged One, but he has to leave the cabin for whatever reason. I don't know. That was 6 months ago when I read that book. But when Burrich comes back, he assumes Fitz is dead because the Forged One had the shirt pin, and Burrich thought the Forged One was Fitz. It was the fact that the Forged One had that pin from King Shrewd that kicked off Burrich marrying Molly. And then that meant that Fitz felt like he could never come back to his old life and never go reach out to Molly again. So that one thing, the King Shrewd pin, hinges on everything else in Fitz's life unraveling. Like I said, I can't explain it any other way than I just feel the author's hand in some of these moments a little bit too much. That would be one critique. I think I already talked about when I talked about Fool's Quest. Another issue I have overall with Realm of the Elderlings is just sometimes the amount of sexual assault, and in some cases, particularly with the second trilogy, Life Ship Trader, Ship of the last book, Ship of Magic, I think, or Ship of Destiny. That one in particular was kind of hard. And then the second book had a lot of that. The third book, thankfully, has a little bit less. There are just times where I'm like, is it really necessary that we just have this needlessly, in my opinion, needlessly cruel moment for this character, especially when it's not one of the main characters anyway. Robin Hobb really did not need to make the raiders who come to Withyewoods or the soldiers who come to Withyewoods with the servants. There was no reason they had to be Chaldean soldiers. She did that so that we could have a cameo from no one's favorite character from the Rainwild Chronicles, Commander Eric or Alec or whatever. No one cares about him. No one needed to know what his story conclusion was, but she comes up with a reason why he would be allied with the servants and why they would be using Chaldeans to do this, and it gives her an excuse to let a bunch of nameless servant characters be raped. And not all of them are nameless. A lot of them have names, which is why it even hurts more. So what really was the point of this? could you just have had them be soldiers who killed a lot of people? And they didn't necessarily have to be Chaldeans. Not that soldiers from the Six Duchies also wouldn't rape people. Like, that's totally fine and cool. Why didn't we explore that? I don't know. So that was like another big kind of overall arching critique of the series. But I wanted to talk about the things that I loved in this book. I love B. I don't know if that's controversial or not, but I love B and I will protect B with my life. I really loved how the side characters that are helping Fool on his quest to reunite with B are all facets of himself, especially when he was a younger boy. We've got Perseverance, who is a stable boy who also has a childhood, crush on a girl. Then you have Spark/Ash, which is the assassin's apprentice, like he was. And then you had Fitzvigilant Lant, who, first off, practically sharing the same name, Fitzchivalry, Fitzvigilant, bastard sons of princes or men of Farseer blood. And also, most importantly, they were both Lord Shade's sons. Like, Shade calling out to Fitz, "Oh, my boy." And there was also another sentence that I loved. I actually think the sentence is in Fool's Quest, not Assassin's Fate, but it's perfect. Quote, "He hooked his bony hand around the back of my head and for a moment held me close. Oh, my boy, the best mistake chivalry ever made was you. Go on now." Cut the cameras. I'm gonna cry. Cut the cameras. Okay, so I loved that aspect of the three of them all embodying a part of Fitz. I think it was a great way for him to not necessarily heal those parts of himself, but to acknowledge those parts of himself and try to protect those children. And he really did appreciate and understand they were children just like he was and try to put them on a better path. Who knows if he succeeded. And then, of course, the ending of the book, particularly the last 3 chapters where we really get the end of Fitz's story, were just so good. I absolutely loved them. I clocked how Fitz was going to die. I literally was messaging a friend who had read the series. I clocked how Fitz was going to die on page 730, which was 75% of the way left, which, to be fair, it wasn't that hard because as soon as he was facing down the servants' soldiers in their castle and I read that line about a dart hitting him, I said, "Those are the death worm darts. Those are the traitor's death darts." And so I told her, I said, he's infected with the worms. That would match the Fool's dream of him dying or by drowning or fire and it being long and painful. But then I said there was that kind of rhyme or that dream of 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 1, which 1 becomes 2 referred to Paragon, the ship, splitting into 2 dragons. And then I was thinking that the 2 becomes 1. I guessed that Fitz will go on to share the Fool's body and they would become one so that both of B's fathers would be in one body. So he would do that to try to escape the worm death that was going to ravage his actual body. But then as soon as we got to the quarry, I was like, oh, he's making a wolf. And then it was going to be him going into the wolf with Night Eyes. And I was like, but the Fool's going to join him. I immediately knew the Fool was going to join him. So I was really happy that I was right because honestly, most of the time there's a lot of prophecies in this book and I'm sure you could have read through them and seen the ending beforehand, but most of the B's dream prophecies things go right over my head. So I was just happy I got that much right. And I just think that the ending made sense. It just made sense that at the end it's back to Fitz, Fool, and Night Eyes in one body being thing. It's not a perfectly sweet ending because they're not really there. It doesn't really seem like there can be much communication with the rest of his family, but they are together. Their beings are together. And Fitz and Night Eyes, from the second that they bonded, have pretty much been one being. Then we had Fitz and the Fool kind of merge into one a lot during Tawny Man. And then the Fool and Night Eyes had a really close relationship in the first trilogy as well when they were together more. So it just makes sense. And then Queen Ketcherkin. Also, this is the first time I'm saying these names out loud. I've only ever really read them. I don't even listen to the audiobooks, so I don't really know how they're pronounced. But Queen Ketcherkin was also there to give her kiss to Night Eyes. And I cut the cameras again. Cut the cameras. And I just really like how the story sets up for B's life. I don't know if she's ever going to write more about it, but there's just so much there with B and her little gang going into the mountains. I really like the idea of her being with her cousin Integrity because I feel like we never really got a lot about dutiful sons, which I think was, in my opinion, a bit of a miss. I would have really liked to have more connection with them. And then the last line, the last sentence, shall we? Per is worried because, quote, there's something stalking us off to the side of the road, moving through the forest. Ketcherkin smiled. The thing that's stalking them is their fathers. Oh my God, I'm gonna cry. Also, talking about the end, right when Bee convinces the fool to join her father into kind of dissolving into the stone wolf, the wolf comes to life and he looks at Bee and he thinks, quote, "Those were astounding lies, cub, and the very last one, the most inspired of all. You have your father's talent for it." And the last kind of words that she said to the fool were, quote, "I lied to hurt you for letting him be dead while you lived, for being loved by him more than he loved me. He loved you more than he ever loved any of the rest of us. Go with him. Go now. It's you he wants, not me. Go." So the last lie that Bee said was that Fitz loved the fool more than he loved Bee or really any of the rest of his friends and his family. And then the entity that is the three of them looks at Bee and says, "That was a lie," as in Fitz loved you just as much as he loved the fool. In fact, I would kind of argue in some ways more than the fool because, there was never a moment that he was ever going to ask his daughter to dissolve herself into the stone with him for eternity, right? That's kind of in some ways, a selfish and crazy thing to do, right? The fact that he did not want her to do that with him just proves his actual love. He wanted her and Nettle and everyone else to live on as they were intended to, right? He kind of took the fool's life from him. The fool could have gone on, although that's the whole point, is really would the fool have had a true life without Fitz by his side. But the fool physically could have gone on. He was restored. He could have gone on to live with and figured out the rest of his very long life. And the fool did not want to. I don't know, that emotional moment really worked for me. So other things about this book. Okay, I will say this was kind of an issue in the second one as well. I didn't love just how much traveling time to the school, like I don't even know how to say the name, Clary's. I didn't love all of the travel time there, especially for Bee. It seemed like every chapter she was making escape and then being recaptured by Vindelier and Dwala and all of that. And while I understand there needed to be some tension there, it just got a little bit too repetitive. Like I could not continue to read her getting her hopes up, trying to escape, getting recaptured by them, and being beaten. Some of that I just don't think we needed. I think they probably could have worked having her be at Claris a little bit longer, getting there even just another day or two earlier would have given us more time to understand that world. I was surprised by just how, right off the bat, how like almost incompetent the four were openly in front of her. They're supposed to be these big bad people who have been controlling the events of the world forever. And I get that part of it was that their vanity and their greed and their complacency, their overconfidence was one of their downfalls. But I was also just like, hey, one of your best operatives just came back from a 3-year-long break. She brings this child with her, this person with her, and they talk to Dwala and interrogate Dwala in front of this like new person, this newcomer. And there's no thought about like their external presentation to this person, maybe separating them, maybe trying to put into Bee's mind, although I understand they didn't know or understand why Bee was important right off the bat, but trying to put into Bee's mind like that they're nice, that they're good people, all of this stuff that I just felt like these super powerful, all-knowing, all-seeing bureaucrats who have been beloved for however many hundreds of years that they've been living, because it is kind of implied that they've been living for a very long time. I thought it was just kind of silly how they immediately were letting all of their dirty laundry air out with this new person there. And then after that, there was a slight attempt to kind of treat Bee with care and trying to gain her trust that way. But I just thought that could have been, if she had been there a little bit longer and their entrance was different, I think Robin Hobb could have spent a little bit more time at the school and having Bee trying to figure out like what is reality, what is truth here. I also the Kenneth son whole arc fell a little bit flat for me. We just don't get enough time with him to really care about his death. I'll be honest, that's it. I also think stop giving me these fake out deaths like with Lant. I knew Lant wasn't dead, because I was like, there's just no way that we're having him die off page and there's not this big emotional moment for him or anything like that. I just wish that she had him found by the live ship Vivacia as she was coming in, and then he's on Vivacia when they pull into the Claris port, and that's when he can be reunited with Spark. I just didn't see the need or the purpose of keeping them apart for another month until they get to Bingtown, and then he immediately finds them in Bingtown. I was like, why? I already talked about the lack of dutiful sons in this book, but also the lack of dutiful himself. He was a huge character in the last trilogy with Fitz, the Tawny Man trilogy, and then he starts this trilogy already a king. Doesn't have a lot of his old self in him, which I guess makes sense because he's no longer a teenage boy, and he, is married, he is a father, he has sons, he's a king. Like, I get all of that, but I just feel like we didn't really get the best of him from this trilogy. And then especially near the end, he was never involved in any of the quests or anything, which again makes sense. He's a king. He can't be. I understand he has to kind of stay in the kingdom, and that was his goal and focus. But especially those last couple chapters, there was really no emotional impact, and that is Fitz's son in his own way. I just wish we got more of him in this trilogy. I will say I did not cry when I got to the end of this book. I know I was like saying cut the cameras, but that is as far as I got. It is a very good emotional, bittersweet ending, but I didn't actually cry. I think part of the issue is it's a little bit too long. The fake out death with Fitz 20% earlier, which again, I knew he was not dead. I was like, there's no way they're ending it there. And I was also like, they made a point about the darts. So there's no way that Fitz is going to die if the darts hitting him had no impact, right? So we had the fake out death with Fitz for a couple chapters, even though I knew he wasn't dead. And then when we do get back to him and he's finally dying, the chapters that we have with him are a little bit hard because while they're really well written and they're in some ways very emotional and horrifying because he is putting himself into this stone, so you can see him and read him literally losing his care for the people that he loves, right? Because he's putting all that love into this stone wolf so that he can continue to live on and protect them. But from his perspective, even though he acknowledges that, he's very disengaged. He's in and out. There's really not a lot of time that those really deep personal, emotional conversations and moments could have been had. So I think part of that in some ways kept me, myself, separated from the true heartbreak. There is probably a whole lot else I would and should like to say about this series, but I think that's going to be it for now. We have now finished the 5th book, I think, in this physical TBR video, and it's the longest book by far, 975 pages. With it, I have finished a 16-book series that I've been working on since September of last year. I'm kind of like, what do I do now, you know? So I think I'm going to give myself a little break from really long books. I'm going to go to another favorite author of mine, which is Hilary Mantel, and I'm going to read The Assassination of Margaret, Thatcher. This is a collection of short stories, like I said, by Hilary Mantel, author of Wolf Hall and Place of Greater Safety. Love her work. I'm hoping this connection to kind of from one favorite author in a beautiful world and some of my favorite characters to a whole new group of characters, world, stories. I know nothing about this, but also from a favorite author will help me a little bit. And like I said, it's super short. It's only like 230 pages. And look at these margins. Just look at them. That is a short book. So I will come back to this video when I finished. All right, guys, it's the next day. I am back and I have now finished The Assassination of Margaret Thatcher by Hilary Mantel. Like I said, this was a collection of short stories. There ended up being 10 of them, which is kind of a lot, so it's hard to give you a succinct overview of what these stories were actually about. I'll just tell you off the bat, this is a 3-star for me. I'm a big Hilary Mantel fan. I love her Wolf Hall trilogy. So I was really excited to see this in a local secondhand used bookstore that I go to sometimes. And I picked it up for $10. I was super excited. And it was a little bit of a letdown. Like I said, 3 stars. I did not hate it at all. It's Hilary Mantel. The writing itself is actually excellent. I just did not particularly like any of the short stories. At the end of every one, I just kind of went, okay, and why tell me the story? What is the importance of the story? I just could not get or glean the purpose of anything in this book. Why this character mattered, why this story mattered, why this moment in time mattered. It wasn't bad. I just didn't think all that much was being said in it. There were just too many of them too. 10 short stories I think is a lot, and some of these stories were very short. And I'm going to be honest, I think I showed you before just how big the margins in this book are. It's like 1.5 inches on all sides. And it still doesn't even get to 250 pages with 10 short stories. About midway through, I just realized like this was just a book put together by the publisher to capitalize on her name, because this book came out after Bring Up the Bodies, which is the 2nd book in her Thomas Cromwell trilogy, but before the 3rd. So they put this book out to capitalize on her name because she had won a bunch of awards already for those first 2 books. And you can just tell because these stories really have no through line. They're not all of that interconnected. The flap says, stories of dislocation and family fracture, of whimsical infidelities and sudden deaths with sinister causes. Mantel brutally and accurately writes about marriage, class, family, and sex. Like, I guess. I don't know. I think you would be hard-pressed to read this book and really find a consistent through line through all of the stories. And I understand that these stories were all written at different points in her life. They weren't necessarily all meant to be in one and to be speaking to each other, but that was part of the issue just for me personally. The narration in a lot of these stories was too similar for me. I think that also caused the stories to kind of all blur together into one big confusing pot. I think my favorite was Harley Street. although I don't really feel super strongly about that. I also really liked the end of Winter Break, but I just didn't necessarily think that the end of Winter Break really connected at all with the rest of that story, like the setup. I was just like, okay, this ending is cool and interesting and shocking, but what does it really do to serve the characters that were just briefly introduced in the story? I don't really know. Again, I feel like maybe I just didn't get it. She's brilliant, like I know she's much smarter than me, so I know there's a lot in these stories that I simply just did not get. And you know what? I simply just did not get it. Mantle's writing is really the only great highlight for me from it. Briefly, I'll just read some of my favorite quotes. I was doing what I had wiggled so hard to avoid. I was sheltering behind the moors of this society, offloading the problem I had created for myself in a way that was feminine, weak, and spiteful. Each afternoon thunder in the distance and my mother saying it'll break tomorrow, as if the summer were a cracked bowl and we were under it. And we saw nothing. We saw something not yet become. We saw something, not a face, but perhaps a negotiating position for a face, perhaps a loosely imagined notion of a face, like God's when he was trying to form us. We saw a blank, we saw a sphere. It was without feature, it was without meaning, and its flesh seemed to run from the bone. This next one is kind of funny. He was, in all, so clean, so sweet, so golden that I backed off, afraid he must be American and about to convert me to some cult. So real, so true. She read us for filth on that. I should like to be rich in anecdote, fertile to invent, but there's no occasion, only the knowledge to a certain number of years have passed. I love this idea of, I wish I had more stories to tell. I wish I could birth forth all of these memories and these tales, but I have nothing. And then the last quote I will read is, for distinguish me, will you? Distinguish me, the distinguished thing. Render me the textile of flesh. Pick me what it is, in the timbre of the voice that marks out the living from the dead. Show me a bone that you know to be a living bone. Flourish it, will you? Find one and show me. So it's Hilary Mantel. There are beautiful lines, paragraphs, sentences in here. There are really interesting ideas, but I just think the stories were too short to fully explore them. I just didn't connect to really any of them. This is unfortunately going to be a book that I don't know if I'm really going to remember or reach for again. Although the cover is just so good and I love Hilary Mantel. I will probably be keeping this book in my collection for a while to join the rest of the books of hers that I own and like on her shrine in my bookshelf. Oh, and then lastly, I did kind of like the last story in this collection, which is the titular, The Assassination of Margaret Thatcher, but it's not nearly as interesting or as good or spectacular as I was expecting with a name like The Assassination of Margaret Thatcher. I wanted more. I just really wanted more from it. And so it left me wanting more, which again, I think is just a little bit disappointing. Before we can move on from this though, I do have bad news. This book is not listed in my spreadsheet. I don't know how that happened. I literally went through my bookshelves 3 times trying to make the spreadsheet and making sure I had every book on it. I already messed up once. I forgot like 5 books at the start of this and I corrected that midway through episode 1. And then I went to mark this as read on my physical TBR spreadsheet and it's not there. So like you can even see, so I'm not crazy. I'm going to try to find Mantle here and she's not listed. I don't know how that happened. I'm just going to add her like somewhere up here. I'm going to say this is my starting TBR. What was status of TBR? This was on my TBR to begin with, and this was a short. And then I'll just update this to be read now. So that does mean that my starting TBR is no longer 46, it is 47. So we'll go over all of the numbers at the end of this once I finish the month. Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. I'm stupid. Next, I'm going to be picking up When the Tides Held the Moon by Vanessa Vida Kelly. This is a gay romance between a merman and the metal worker who constructed the cage in which the merman is being held at a freak show. I'll be honest, I'm a little worried about this one. I don't know how much I'll love it. I'm not a big romance person. However, for pride, I do want to give this like my full good faith effort. So I'll let you know how I feel. All right, you guys, I'm back. It's time to talk about When the Tides Held the Moon, and I'm DNFing it. You can see up here where my bookmark is. I'm about 45% of the way through. I'm on page like 207 out of 430 pages or something like that. And yeah, I'm DNFing. I'm giving up. This book is a gay romance between a merman and I keep calling him a metal worker, a blacksmith. He's a blacksmith. That's the correct term. A Puerto Rican blacksmith in New York City. This takes place in 1911. And the blacksmith is commissioned to create a big giant cage that can hold a merman. And then he gets roped into capturing this merman. And then he joins the circus freak show where this merman is being held. This book does have illustrations in it. Like this cover is something that was drawn by the artist, and throughout the book it has pretty interesting, pretty cool illustrations. And you know what? Those illustrations were really the thing that made me give this book a chance, because I don't read many books with illustrations like this. I got this through the May aardvark box. May was my birthday month. I was like, let me pick up an extra book that I might not love, but I want to see, I want to try it for myself. And y'all, I don't know why I tried. I don't know why I tried. I already had a suspicion that I would not like this book because I don't like many romances. And you know what? It's right. The way I would describe this book: trite, obvious, overly sentimental, repetitive, and just odd, okay? So I actually liked the first 5 or 6 chapters of this book. It was around chapter 8, which is 110 pages in, 110, 15 pages in, where I started to write notes and I started to just find things to hate. So my big thing about this is the merman, whose name is Rio. Well, that's not his full name, but that's the name that Benny gives him and that the merman accepts, because the merman won't give Benny or any of the humans his real name. Rio becomes way too civil with Benny way too fast. There's one good scene like in chapter 6 or 7, like one chapter before this, where Benny is helping the owner of this freak show, who is the man who helped capture Rio. He was helping him put something up, and the owner has to run and go get something, and he tells Benny to stay where he is, and he's standing on top of the cage. Rio ends up hitting the cage and causing Benny to not fall in because there's grates over it, and then he grabs him and is choking him and is threatening to rip his head off and kill him and feast on his blood. All of these great things that you would do if you were captured, okay? And you had the chance to hurt your captor. 10, 15 pages later, they're friendly. Mainly, Rio is friendly to Benny. I don't care what Benny does. Benny can be friendly or not friendly to Rio. He's not the issue here. I'm just sitting here, why is this captive merman being so understanding of his captors? Of specifically this one captor. I did not like that. And the worst thing is, and this is not a spoiler, this happens in the 2nd or 3rd chapter, okay? So this is a very big early plot point. This is the setup. The worst thing is that when they captured Rio's mermaid mother was also there, and she was trying to save her son because he was caught up in a net. He was trying to save her son, and the owner of the freak show, who is the mastermind behind capturing Rio, who knew about mermans, all of this stuff, he shoots her, kills her, and when mermaids, I guess, die, their body dissolves into foam and water and waves, and she goes back to the ocean. She is dead, and Rio saw this happen. The reason that she was shot is she was on top of Benny. She was pleading with Benny to save him. She was telling him, save him, and she's holding Benny down, and that is when the owner shoots her in the chest. So not only did these people kidnap Rio, they killed his mother, and within 20 pages of being captured, he is being friendly to one of them. And I'm like, what the fudge? And Benny wasn't even doing anything that incredibly kind. And it's not played as oh, Rio's playing a trick on them, he's trying to play nice or anything. No, this is just start of their romance, and they are already way too civil and close with each other. What is the point in giving us this romance between this captive and this person who is, if not the captor himself, in line and working for the captor? What is the point of setting up the situation if you're not going to have a slower burn, enemies to romance type of thing? It just, right out the gate, they've got a connection. It's not quite instant love, but it's close enough. And I did not like it. There were multiple times throughout this 200 pages that I read, which again is about halfway, where I thought Rio was just way too understanding and kind and making excuses for Benny. The whole reason this kind of civility comes about is Benny starts talking about, I've lost people too. And I'm like, shut the up. Shut up. You lost people to a hurricane, and you lost people to consumption. You didn't lose your mother when you were violently kidnapped and your mother was murdered in front of you. And just the gall of him to talk about this, to be I just want you to know, you're not alone. I've also lost people that I've loved. When you are part of the group, I know he was more of a passive kind of bystander and who was just new to it. He didn't know what was going on. I get all of that. But he is still, from Rio's point of view, part of the group who did those terrible things to him and his family. Benny has the gall to be yeah, I've lost people too. And Rio is just oh, wow, we have a connection. He's actually not that bad of a man. And then within another 30 pages, the owner of the freak show is giving Benny Benny the keys to the cage. He's giving Benny the keys to all of the facilities. He's giving Benny the keys to the cage, and he's saying, hey, I'm going to be out of town for like a couple days. I have to go. And Benny, who has said that he wants to free Rio, does not take that opportunity to free him. I don't understand why she made this choice if we are not supposed to be critiquing it. That is terrible. You have a character who says, oh, it's terrible that we're keeping this merman locked up. I really, really want to help him. He's being haunted in his dreams by the ghost or something or whatever, the spirit of Rio's mother. So he has this motivation to save him, and he knows it's wrong. But then he has the opportunities. He has keys in his hand to everything. And he's like, oh, I can't do it because I can't get anyone to help me. It's so stupid. It's so silly. It's so frustrating. The easy way to deal with the situation is just not have the owner of the freak show to trust Benny at this early of a stage. We're talking page 150. 150. Benny should have released Rio. And again, it's not presented as sinister or anything like that. We're supposed to honestly, genuinely believe that Benny really wants to free Rio, but he just simply can't because the cage is too heavy. There are a bunch of people in this freak show who he's slowly been making friends with, and he says that he can't trust them yet, even though we've been told over and over and over again that these people are scared of the merman because they think that the owner is going to use the merman as like the main draw, and then he's going to like get rid of all the other freak shows. And already at this point, Benny's already like, wow, these people are my new family. Like, it's already found family. So I don't get this idea that he could not have freed him at that point in time. He should have freed him at that point in time, and this book should have been over. It's just such a silly narrative choice to give Benny the opportunity to free him and then not have Benny free him and then present that as the correct right choice. Also, I don't know if this next part is a spoiler. It might not be. Okay, I might be reading too much into it. I had this thought at page 130 and I did not finish reading the book, and I don't know. My theory is that Benny is a part merman type thing. He's like part merman, or he himself is a merman. I don't know. There's this whole thing about when Benny was 6 or 7, he doesn't actually know his age. He doesn't remember anything before this moment in time. There was a hurricane that swept through Puerto Rico, and he woke up next to the river that as it was receding, and he had no memory of anything. He was just an alone kid. They could never find his family or anything like that, and he got taken in by this kind older woman who he called his aunt. But she wasn't his aunt. No one knows who this kid is. And since then, he never goes into the water. He never swims because he's scared because of the hurricane. He has asthma. He can't really breathe that well. He's a really good singer. Not only is he a really good singer, he's also a good mimic of voices. He can do impersonations really well and really easily. So all of those clues lead me to believe that he's a merman. I don't know if he is, though. I can't tell you. I just think that the way this is going to end is he's going to free somehow eventually Rio the merman, and then the merman's going to be like, come, I'll teach you to swim so you can visit me or something. And then he's going to go into the ocean for the first time in however many years, and his gills or whatever, his lungs, whatever, the merman biology is going to come back. There's nothing given to us about if mermaids or mermans can like walk on land or anything like that, but that's just my theory. Yeah, I really don't like how quickly Rio became so fine with Benny. On page 132, this is only their second or third interaction post-kidnapping. One of them was the time that he threatened to like kill him, and that was the only time we really ever saw some aggression and some real true anger at the situation. Second or third time they've met, and Benny has an asthma attack in front of Rio, and Rio coaches him through how to breathe properly, which first off, you're a merman. You don't know how to breathe. What the hell are we talking about? She comes up with like this biology where, oh, actually I have 4 lungs and I know how to like control my breath, all of this stuff. Fine. Okay, whatever. Sure. He comes up with some technique about listening to his body, expanding his throat, all of this weird stuff, which again, I'm like, this only makes sense if Benny is a mermaid. I do not think that you can just mind trick your body into breathing right if you have asthma. Like, I understand a certain part of it could be psychological, where once you know you're having trouble breathing, that gives you anxiety and that just compounds upon the breathing issues, but you can't just expand your airway and then suddenly you can breathe well. I don't know. That whole part did not work for me. I was mainly just annoyed that Rio was helping him breathe better like this, and then I got annoyed that it was actually working. I don't know if it does or not. Someone with asthma might be able to say, oh no, actually these are all very real techniques that are like proven to truly work. Great. Why does a merman know them? Why does a merman in 1911 know these tricks? I don't buy it. Another thing I did not buy. There was, okay, I'm gonna read it. It's 142. Quote, a gall fell out of my mouth. Mr. Morgan? British? Are you kidding? That's Benny. I always hear that word, kidding. There's not a juvenile goat for miles. What does that even mean? That's Rio asking that. Why does a merman know that the correct word for a baby goat is kid, first off? Secondly, why do they know that definition, but not kidding as in a joke? And third, like, why have this whole sentence in there? It's supposed to give them banter, I guess, and supposed to help establish a conversation and a relationship beyond just, hey, remember when you kidnapped me? Yeah, I do sure feel sorry about that, but I'm just going to keep you in this cage. Oh, it's okay. You're nice. I know you're a nice man. I got very annoyed with that. And there's many times through this book where Rio as a merman just is too human. He's too human. And she tries to explain it by like, they have really good hearing. And so when they're in the ocean, they just overhear the sailors talk. And he learns a lot of things about humans that way, which I think is totally fine and valid. But what conversations is he overhearing from sailors that he learns the definition of a baby goat's name is a kid, and then he doesn't know what kidding is? He doesn't know that kidding is joking. To me, that is not possible. It is not possible that he would overhear sailors talking about a young goat is called a kid before he learns the expression, I'm kidding. Nope. And that just is an issue I have a lot through this book is Rio is supposed to have a lot of wisdom, and he is older. Mermans like live longer. So we don't actually know how old Rio is. He's still a young adult in their world. He hasn't been around that long, but he's older year-wise than Benny, and Benny's 22. But he's generally around that development stage. But he has a lot of wisdom, which is fine. I just think a lot of his wisdom is too human. You are a merman. Give us more merman sayings. And there are some. She does have some merman sayings. She has this idea of the currents, and instead of God help me, it's Neptune help me, which to me is still too human-based. You're just replacing God for Neptune and then expecting us to be like, yes, that's great world building. It's not. It makes no sense. But one of the other areas that this bothered me, this was on page 200. This is Rio saying this. The softest hearts wear the thickest armor. Why is a merman talking about armor? Especially in 1911. Like, if this was a merman who was alive in like the 1700s, sure, he could have seen armor, could have overheard sailors talking about armor, seen armor come down on fighters and warriors who got into a scuffle or whatever above on the ship, and then they die and they're sinking down with armor. Although you shouldn't really be wearing a full plate of armor on a ship, but whatever, okay? I could maybe understand that. And I guess maybe he found armor scavenging down on the ocean depths, although we never actually hear anything about him scavenging and finding, like, he's not Ariel. We hear nothing about having a collection of human items or anything like that. So why does, first off, a merman know about armor? And secondly, why would armor be part of a merman's like saying on this? The easy thing here is to say the softest hearts wear the thickest scales. Sure, that's still a little cringe and like simple and obvious, but again, this goes to the sentimentality in this book. It's just too cringe and obvious anyway, so you might as well at least focus on the fact that the character speaking is a merman, and therefore they would not say the same things that we would. The softest hearts wear the thickest armor is just a human saying, and you're just giving this to Rio to kind of try to convince us that he's wise and he's soft and he's compassionate and he's moved past human cruelty and all of this stuff, which, like, fine, great, yada yada yada, but he's speaking to human. I just do not buy that this is a merman. This is a merman who has never interacted with humans before. Why does he speak like one? Why does he know the word for a young goat? It's just, yeah, overall, I've already talked about this book way too long. This is why I'm not continuing to read it. Maybe if you really like romance, you could like this book. I don't read a lot of romance. I cannot speak to how I would rank this against other romances. This is the third gay romance I've read this year, and the other two are better. I read Icebreaker, not Hannah Grace's Icebreaker. I read Icebreaker by A.L. Graziotti, I think, and then I read You Should Be So Lucky, I think, by Cat Sebastian. And both of those are better than this, for sure. I could at least finish those. I'm not going to finish this. If this book was maybe not 430 pages, I might attempt to finish it. If it was, like most romances should be, 350 pages, I maybe would have pushed through, because I already got to page like 200. I'm close to halfway through this book, but I just know I'm not going to like it, and I just do not want to waste my time reading a book I just know I'm probably just going to continue to hate. Storygraph does not allow you to rate books at UDNF, which I think is BS. Miss me with that whole, you can't rate books if you didn't finish them because maybe it got better at the end. If the reason that I do not finish a book is because the quality up to that point is bad, that is a rating in it of itself, okay? But if I could rate this, I would give this 2 stars. It's a DNF. I'm going to unhaul it and curse it upon someone else. Okay, curse it upon someone else is wild. It is not that bad. I'm sorry. Sometimes I get a little snarky and I shouldn't be. It's really not that bad, okay? I promise you it's not that bad, but I very much disliked it. And I'm more angry at myself that I even tried it. I suspected I would not like this, And I should have just listened to myself. I don't know. I guess the lesson here is like sometimes you don't have to step out of your comfort zone. If you really understand yourself and you know what kind of books you will enjoy and what books you think are actually well written and worth the time, don't waste your time forcing yourself to try something else just because you feel like you have to. All right, next book on the docket is going to be Their Eyes Were Watching God. So I'll come back when I finish that. All right, I have now finished Their Eyes Are Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. So I'm not going to talk about this book too in depth just because I'm going to have a separate video on this book. I'm going to try to start doing separate videos for reviews and analysis of the books that I'm rereading for my revisiting my high school assigned reading list. It might take me a while to edit that video and upload that video, but I have a goal to do that. But I don't know if you can see, but I have a lot of tabs on this. I'm actually terrible at annotating my books. I just think you can see I actually don't annotate it. I just like tab right above the line that I think is interesting. And that's just because I think there's something so gorgeous about an unmarked book. At the same time, some of my favorite books on my bookshelves are ones that I've had for years that are absolutely destroyed and do have annotations in them. So I'm a contradictory person. You know, I'm human with many facets. I think maybe if I read this for a third time, let me restate that. When I read this for a third time, I will probably just switch right to annotating, but for now, I just like to tab the moments that I like to refer to. But as you can see, there were a lot of things that I tabbed. And tabs can mean two things. They can mean moments, lines, metaphors, or something that I really liked. Or they could be moments that I absolutely hated. I tabbed some things in The Priory of the Orange Tree and When the Tides Held the Moon. Those weren't necessarily good tabs. All of these were good tabs. This book was fantastic. I actually did, I think, what they call immersive reading with this, where I both physically read it and listen to the audiobook at the same time. And that has to be the way you do this. Because something I had even forgotten until I got to the first page and I was like, oh, that's this book. It is written phonetically. So all of the characters in this book are from the South. Most of them are Black and they have a very strong dialect and accent. Hurston like writes out that accent in the dialogue. So instead of it being I, the word would be AH, like ah. And instead of WAS for was, it'll be WUZ, was. And those would be like the easiest ones to grasp. There are definitely times where I could look at the word itself and not know what word it was. But then when I was listening to it, once you hear the cadence of the narrator, it makes perfect sense. And it sounds honestly, truly like beautiful when you just go full in on the dialect, but you have to either read the words out loud or listen to them spoken to really understand what the characters are saying. And the dialogue is very natural. She's really just trying to capture the sound of these people and how they would really speak. And she does it really, really well. But listening to the audiobook, 100% the way to go with the immersive reading because it just helped you bridge the gap. But the narrator for the audiobook was fantastic. I loved her. And it's a short audiobook. It's only like, this book in total is short. It's only about 193 pages. The audiobook is only about 8 hours. So I was able to get through it in a couple of days. And I would say this book is actually pretty dialogue heavy. I would say my favorite moments, my favorite lines were usually Hurston's actual prose. I remember I really liked the kind of reoccurring metaphor or the motif, I guess, of the mule and everything that represented. And then as I started to read, I remembered more and more about the importance and the symbolism of Janie, who is our main character. I haven't even told you what this book is about, but Janie, our main female character, or main narrator, although this book sometimes switches between points of views a little bit and goes third person at some points, first person at other points. It's really interesting. Like the importance of her hair and the symbol of her having her hair up in a cloth versus like down at her waist and all of the men staring at her hair. I had a vivid flashback suddenly of, oh, we definitely talked about that in English class. That is really like one of the few moments I truly remember from that class. I just definitely appreciated this book a lot more this time around. My first tab is actually on the first page. I think this is one of the strongest first pages I've ever read. Not necessarily the first line alone, although the first line alone is very good and strong and important throughout the rest of the book, but the entire first page is immediately captivating. So this is the third paragraph quote. So the beginning of this was a woman, and she had come back from burying the dead, not the dead of sick and ailing with friends at the pillow and the feet. She had come back from the sodden and the bloated, the sudden dead, their eyes flung wide open in judgment. And then this is immediately we get, like I said, I've mentioned the mule kind of reoccurring metaphor, and we get it in the fourth paragraph. These sitters had been tongueless, earless, eyeless conveniences all day long. Mules and other brutes had occupied their skin. But now the sun and the boss man were gone, so the skins felt powerful and human. They became lords of sounds and lesser things. They passed nations through their mouths. They sat in judgment. That first page, just right here, chapter 1, incredibly strong opening of a book. And it really does not stop after that. You can see I had a lot. I hope you can see. I had a lot of tabs on this thing. I think this is going to be a 5-star read. Like I said, I will get a more in-depth review and longer video out at a later date, hopefully sometime in July or August. But this video is already long enough. You don't need me to speak about what I'm going to speak there. So definitely subscribe if you're interested in hearing more of my thoughts on Their Eyes Were Watching God. But I'm super happy that I reread it. I'm super happy that I went ahead and gambled that I would enjoy it enough that I wanted to buy a physical copy in advance. That was the right choice. I'm so smart. But all of my high school books, pretty much all of my high school books, I threw away, especially any of the assigned reading ones. As soon as high school ended, I said, these books traumatized me. My entire education traumatized me. I don't want to look at it again. And now I'm finally getting to come back to it and just appreciating it with new eyes. Definitely read Their Eyes Were Watching God. And if you're like, but what is this book actually about? First off, stop asking questions. And secondly, it's about Janie. It's about Janie finding out who she is, exploring the world, opening her mind, expanding her mind, and her struggles about doing this in the time and place in which she was raised. We're about a generation and a half removed from slavery, one full generation removed from slavery, but Janie's grandmother was a slave, and Janie's mother was born just a couple of weeks before Janie's grandmother was freed from being a slave. But it really just follows Janie through her life, particularly her love life and the realities and constraints of marriage and being a woman in a world where many men want to cage their women and their wives. And Janie does not want that life. The first sentence of this book, like I said, is very important. It talks about ships on the horizon and the dreams that they can carry. And let's just say that Janie has dreams and a life and a mind of her own that she would really love the opportunity to express. And this book is all about her kind of struggling towards that moment of true self-expression, self-actualization, independence, and choice. That's my opinion of it. Like I said, because it's so fresh out of slavery and because Hurston is such an incredible Black writer, there is a lot here about race in America, and just the Black community. This book is extremely focused on Black characters. A big chunk of this does take place in Florida, which it was fun because I live in Florida. I live in Central Florida, so I recognized a lot of the places that, they were talking about. That's going to be it for this book. 5 stars. Go read it. Don't listen to me talk about it. Go read it and listen to it. All right, so now that I finished Their Eyes Were Watching God, I have finished the 8 books I selected for June, which is fantastic. A lot of big books. I'm not going to talk long about this one. I actually hid from you that I did finish Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. The audiobook for this came in through my library, and so I was able to start over from the beginning. Like I said, I had originally gotten like 33% of the way through this book a couple months ago and then paused on it and didn't get back to it. So when the audiobook came in, I started over from the beginning and I just listened to it a couple hours a day when I was at work over the last 2 weeks. Overall, I really liked it. This is a 4-star for me. I wish I could love it a little bit more, and this is nothing against Robin Wall Kimmerer. I think this is just me and my somewhat hard relationship with nonfiction. I always want to love the books more than I truly do, especially when I compare it to just some of my favorite fictions. There's a lot of fantastic information in this book. Anytime she was talking about the true Indigenous knowledge and how we can find a balance between Indigenous knowledge and science and how those two have to work in connection and combination and collaboration with each other, I love that. When we were focusing a lot on the science, and to be fair, she doesn't focus a lot on the science. She would just every so often sprinkle in, here's the scientific name for this plant or this thing or that thing. That's when my eyes started to glaze over. I started to be like, we are going back to high school English. We are not going back to high school biology. I refuse to do that, all right? So for me, those were like the long moments, and it could at times get a little bit repetitive. Like I think every book, except for this, because this is under 200 pages. But like I think for every book, it could have been a little bit shorter. It is 350-ish pages, and I just think with some of the repetition and just wide range of topics this book covered, it probably could have been a bit more focused and clocked in around 315 pages, and I might have liked it a little bit more. But it is fantastic. Everyone was raving about this book before I read it, and I was a little bit like, really? A book about plants everyone loves? I totally get it. I do really love this book. I'm super happy that I have it. I think once you read it, it's a great book to have around your house for reference, because there are definitely certain stories and myths I know I'm going to think about and remember for a long time. And I love that I can kind of have this book as a reference and go to that chapter or that section where she talks about it more. That actually makes 9 books, but we have 4 more days left in the month. So I'm going to try to fit in at least one more book. And the book I've decided from my physical TBR that I'm going to try to read is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I'm so sorry, Paulo Coelho. I'm so sorry. I know I'm probably butchering that. Like most things, I actually don't know what this book is about. I picked it up at a secondhand local bookstore for $8 because it was literally the only book in any way in a good condition in that bookstore. After I bought it, I've since heard many mid and even bad reviews of this book. So I'm picking this book because first off, it's short. And second off, I think I might hate it. And I think I might DNF it, which if I do DNF it, that's great. It still gets a book off my shelf. I'm then going to pick up Passing by Nella Larson. So this will make book 10 and this will be potential book 11. If I don't get to this month, it will be in next month's episode. All right, I finished The Alchemist. I finished it. I did not DNF it. I almost DNF'd 3 times and then I was like, no, it's only another like 60 pages, power through, and I did. But I did not like it. I don't think I hated it as much as I think a lot of other people. Like I hear a lot of vitriol for this book and I don't think I hated it that much. I did hate it, but it was more of like an apathetic hate. It was more of a, thank God this is over. It's just very oversimplistic, very boring, incredibly repetitive. This book is only 170 pages and those pages don't actually have that many words on them, big margins, and it is still somehow too long. I do not know how that's possible. This should have been a short story novella, something like that. No more than 70 pages. Literally, you could have cut 100 pages from this book. It was full of like little things that I think I was supposed to take away, like follow your dreams or the universe wants you to achieve your dreams. And I just like, I'm sorry, I don't believe in that crap. I do think it's crap. You know, I should have been clued in because the back quote is, to realize one's destiny is a person's only obligation. And I just fundamentally disagree with that unless one's destiny is to be a beautiful, kind, loving person to everyone on this planet, which I struggle with sometimes. I think people should have many obligations to themselves, their family, their friends, their community, the world. Fellow humans, but whatever. None of it was new or interesting to me. It was just mainly repetitive. The main character in this book just like thinks about this one conversation that he had with one character around page 40. He just constantly recalls that conversation every 6 pages. And I'm like, I get it. This is not a complex idea that you were telling me. I don't need you to spell it out for me. Is this book written for children? That could be the issue. This could be like a book written for middle schoolers. And I would almost forgive it then, although not really, because I wouldn't want a middle schooler to like learn these types of lessons in my personal opinion. I thought the main character, Santiago, the boy, I think it would have worked better if he was younger. I think he's like 18 at around the start of the story because it says he like left home to become a shepherd at 16 and it's like 2 years later. So he's 18 and he does not read to me like an 18-year-old. I think it would have worked better if he was like 10 or 12. And then I would have a bit more understanding about why he's learning these lessons and why he seems so simple. And the writing is just so simplistic. And I know I was just talking earlier about how simple John Steinbeck's writing is, but maybe simple is not the right word for his work. Like this is simple. It's just every single sentence is just, it's the same type of words in the exact same order every single time. I was getting over it. Don't even get me started on these women. Fatima, who is like the love interest of the main character here, she is the most passive trad wife, has not a thought in her head. Literally, her only thoughts in her head are the men go out to the desert and the women wait. And sometimes the men never come back. But we don't mind. We don't mind that our husbands, our fathers, our sons, we don't mind that they die out in the desert because they're chasing their dreams. And it's a woman's job to wait for them to come back. And I was like, are they serious right now? Is this like, what? That is, I think, first off, the only named female character. To be fair, there's not a lot of characters in this, and even less of them are actually named, so whatever. It's a bit of a basic critique, but there's only 2 female characters, and only one of them is named. You know, there was a lot of like weird things about like the Romani people, and I thought it was totally, I don't know, I wouldn't say fine, but it was totally understandable and perhaps realistic that the boy, Santiago, would have like racist thoughts against the Romani people and like use slurs and have stereotypes against them, because that is literally what many people have felt about the Romani throughout time. But I thought this book was going to challenge that. I thought this book was going to have Santiago like realize that they're the same as anyone else, like they're not asking for anything crazy. But no, at the end of the book, he's like, oh, I have to go back and give that slur 1/10 of my treasure. That's just like that slur. They're always doing that. And I'm sitting here like, Jesus Christ, man. I mean, I know this was written like 1988. I'm sorry, there's no excuse. You could have had this character have a realization and by you I mean the author, could have had his racism and his stereotypes challenged. And I know that he likes to do that because he had Santiago come around to like the Arabs and the Muslim characters. He was scared of them at first. He thought they were like kind of weird and he was othering them. And then he came to like appreciate a lot about their people and their culture and their land. So I know the author, if he wanted to, if he actually cared, if he thought that the Romani people were perhaps unjustly treated, he could have like made a point about that in the book, and he just doesn't. So I'm like, okay. So yeah, I really hated this book. It was stupid. It was bad. It was bad. 2 stars, and it's lucky he's getting 2 stars. That's really all I want to talk about this book. There's still 3 days left in the month. I'm going to try to squeeze in Passing by Nella Larsen. Now, I have another confession, okay? Today, I did a bad thing. I'm sorry. I went to Barnes & Noble. And then today, because I took today off, I was like, what else am I going to do? You know, like go outside? No, I'm going to go to the bookstore. So first we have Blackouts by Justin Torres. I actually don't really know what this book is about. I think it's about like a gay man who finds a manuscript and it's been like redacted, and I just think it's about him reading it and trying to piece together things and stuff about history. I don't really know. The reason I got it is there's like a lot of interesting formatting with it. I don't know how well I'm showing that off. Probably not well at all. There's a lot of really interesting formatting in it. Like here's some of the redacted stuff. Because I probably would have just read this like through my library, but I think there's something about the format of this that might be best read physically as opposed through an ebook, because there are like pictures and things like that in here. So again, it was also like buy one, get one 50% off. So the other one that I got as part of that was The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. I don't know what these are called. Deckled edges, serrated edges. I don't know. I love the looks of these. I don't actually love the cover of this book. Like, why is her face like that? It was buy one, get one 50. And so these are the 2 that I ended up getting. And then I picked up a Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway. And the reason I bought this... That's a receipt. And the reason I got this is because, well, first off, I do just want to read Ernest Hemingway in general. And then secondly, I'm pretty sure he was a big like inspiration for John Steinbeck. Actually, what I was reading is all American authors are probably inspired or have their writing style impacted a lot by Ernest Hemingway. But I think it was like a critique against John Steinbeck that he was kind of like a Hemingway copy. So because I'm a John Steinbeck fan, I think maybe I would like Hemingway, and then it'd be interesting if I can see and find Ernest Hemingway's influence on Steinbeck's like actual works. I just picked up a Farewell to Arms because this was the cover and like the edition that I kind of liked the most out of all of the books there at the store. So those 3 books are going to be added to my TBR. At the end of this, we'll go through all of the numbers again. But this last one is not going to be on my physical TBR. This is How to Read Literature Like a Professor by Thomas Foster. So I actually read this in high school. So I guess you could kind of count this as part of like my revisiting high school read. I did have this book in high school. Our English teacher made us buy it. And I remember it was pretty helpful for me. So of course I got rid of it. But now that I am like revisiting some of those high school reads, I want to just have this back as a reference guide because I remember finding it helpful. I don't know if I will still find it super helpful or if it's going to be a bit too introductory or simple, but it's been a while since I've been in an English class and I feel like I'm really understanding the classics. I'm really liking them. I want to get more into them. And I think, any extra help I can have is probably good. That's the update. I'll be back when I finish Passing. I'm back. Y'all, I've had such a productive day off. I finished The Alchemist this morning, filmed that little section, went to the bookstore, came back, filmed that little section, and now I'm back to tell you that I finished Passing by Nella Larsen. I was like, I hope I can finish this in 3 days. I finished this in an afternoon. I finished this in like 4 hours, less than 4 hours. Like I decided to do with Their Eyes Were Watching God, I ended up doing immersive reading where I listened to the audiobook and then read along physically. I got the audiobook from my library. We love the library, and the audiobook was only 4 hours. I put it on about 1.5 times speed just to kind of give me a good pace where I could also read along at that speed with my eyes, and we finish it at just about like 3 hours. Briefly, what this book is about, our narrator is Irene Redfield, who is a light-skinned Black woman who lives in New York City, but was born and raised in Chicago. And one day she's back in Chicago alone without her husband or her kids, and she runs into a childhood friend of hers or a childhood acquaintance named Claire Kendry, who is an even lighter skinned Black woman to the point where Claire can completely pass as white without almost anyone detecting it. She is even married to a white man who does not know that herself is black. And we know that he doesn't know because he is extremely racist and even talks about how he would never allow any black blood in his family. He doesn't use the word black though, so I'll let you figure out what word he does use. And so anyway, when Claire and Irene meet up for the first time in more than a decade, Irene learns the extent that Claire is passing, and they just kind of get drawn back into each other's lives, sometimes without Irene's consent in this. Irene feels very mixed feelings about Claire. She's gorgeous, she's beautiful, but she has this very cold, at least in Irene's opinion, this very cold personality. She is very much like, I want what I want and I don't care about the risks or who I hurt or anything to get that. And Irene doesn't quite like that because Irene is much more steady. She values stability, safety, and she just kind of wants to live her peaceful life with her kids and her husband, and she wants to protect her family from the dangers of their race in this country of America. So I feel like that's all I can really say about the plot of this book without spoiling anything. It's a very short book. It's only 120 pages. So that is just the basic setup. It just follows Irene as she learns more about Claire, and they become part of each other's lives again. They become friends, and Irene ends up introducing Claire to some of the Black community that she hasn't been a part of for more than a decade since she made this choice to pass 100% of the time as white. Irene herself can pass as white, but her husband is Black, her children, one of them is more light-skinned and one of them is dark, and she is much more involved in the Black community in New York City where she lives. You know, they're very interesting kind of foils of each other. They come from the same place, they have the same general aesthetic, but their lives diverged quite a lot. And then when they're brought back together, there's just a lot of natural tension between them and how they view the world and how they interact with the world and how they use their kind of white passing skin in their everyday lives. So overall, I actually really enjoyed this book. I did really like it. You can see I had some tabs, and all of these things were things I liked or themes or metaphors that I found interesting. But overall, I'm going to give it, I think, either a 3.5 or 3.75. The end of this book was incredibly strong. Like the last 2 pages, 5 stars. I loved it. I loved the end. However, for me, it just couldn't quite make up for some of the things I wasn't vibing with as much. Unfortunately, I did not care at all about Brian, who is Irene's husband. And I don't necessarily think you're supposed to necessarily care about him, but anytime Brian came on the page, my eyes kind of glazed over. I was like, oh my God, not this guy again. Brian is a very important character in Irene's story. He is her husband, so he's involved all the time. He's always around, and he always takes all of the fun atmosphere out of a scene when he's around, which I think is the point. I think he is supposed to be a drag because he's kind of a drag on Irene, but I just didn't necessarily care about the drama between him and Irene. I didn't really care about their relationship. That is a big focus in Irene's arc and narration, is her relationship with Brian, and I was like, I don't care. The best parts of this book were definitely when Claire and Irene were in a room together and talking. Those were the most tension-filled, captivating scenes for me. And there were quite a few in there, at least 3 or 4 good moments of just them sitting down, talking to each other, talking about their lives and the conflict and the tension that just arose between the way they see the world. It's so different. Loved that. I wanted this book to be a bit more like toxic lesbian vibes, and unfortunately we didn't get that. So I think if Brian did not exist, or he was a footnote instead of, third build character on this, I would have liked it a lot more. And that's not really Nella Larsen's fault or issues with her writing. For the story that she is telling, Brian is important. I just wish we got less of him, That's, I think, all I can really say without giving more spoilers. I'll try to decide if I want to do 3.5 or 3.75. Like I said, that ending is so strong. I think that's why I'm considering a 3.75. Before that moment, it was a 3.5. But the ending was so good. I liked the questions it kind of raised, and it also allowed me to go back and look at some things that maybe foreshadowed certain events or were clues to how this could have ended, and I liked it. So maybe that will be the 3.75 stars. Something I did not realize is actually I ended up reading 2 Harlem Renaissance books this month. This was not the plan at all. Nella Larsen and Zora Neale Hurston were kind of contemporaries during the Harlem Renaissance movement, and I think these are now the only 2 books from writers of the Harlem Renaissance that I've read so far, and I enjoyed them a lot. I can see why these are both considered classics, and especially why this book has been so relevant. There's just so much here about racial identity and the construction of racial identity and What does it really mean to be Black? Who gets to determine what Black is, what Black looks like? So I did really just appreciate that and liked it and could see why this book still has kind of important relevance and staying power. I know I gave it a 3.75. That's nothing against the writing or the themes or anything like that. It's just kind of comes down to personal enjoyment and preference about the story that I wanted to read about. I would say 60% of this gave me exactly what I wanted. It was the other 40% where I was like, go back to the girls, go back to the girls, go back to the girls. So, but I would definitely still recommend this. Like I said, it's short, it's still really poignant, has great moments and events. The ending is super strong. I loved the ending. Yeah, great book. With that, I have officially read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 books this month, 11 of which were on my physical TBR list. The one book I read that was not on my physical TBR was still a book I owned physically. It was that summer fun book, which I did talk about in this video. And I don't think I'm going to start or finish another physical book this month. So I think we can finally wrap up this episode because I know it's been a long one. I'm sorry. I think going forward, I might not try to film these over the course of a whole month. I might break up these episodes into 2 or 3 week blocks, especially if I'm going to continue to read a lot of books on my physical TBR like I did this month. Okay, so here we back are on my tracking spreadsheet. I need to just go ahead and mark passing as read, so that's up here. So then again, a reminder, all the books I read: Priory of the Orange Tree, Fool's Quest, Assassin's Fate, Bloodmarked, When the Tides Held the Moon, which I DNF'd, The Assassination of Margaret Thatcher, The Red Pony, Their Eyes Are Watching God, Braiding Sweetgrass, The Alchemist, and Passing. And then the 12th book, Summer Fun, not on this list, but I gave you a little review of it anyway. I wanted to jump into Storygraph. Storygraph says I read 11 books and 5,320 pages, but I'm pretty sure these 11 books do not include the books I DNF'd. So I DNF'd When the Tides Held the Moon. So this is the thing that I wanted to talk about. I wanted to go over my star ratings. So you'll see that I have 1 star. This is an update. I think I told you I was giving The Alchemist 2 stars. I've updated this 1 star because I remembered just how bad the racism was, and I was like, no, the writing quality itself is 2 stars. You lose a star for the racism. But you can see I do utilize quite a lot the quarter star systems from Storygraph. I'm sorry, I just like to do it because otherwise I just feel like it shortchanges books, because I'm someone usually who will round down. I know a lot of people round up in their rating, but if I couldn't give a 4.75, this book, which I believe was Fool's Quest, I would have given it a 4.5. And if I couldn't give this book 4.25 stars, which was Braiding Sweetgrass, I would have given it a 4. I very rarely find myself, when I'm in between these quarter stars, I ever feel the need to round up. I always round down to the next half star. But anyway, overall, 11 books, and my average star rating was 3.73. I had 2 5 stars, and those 2 5 stars were Assassin's Fate and Their Eyes Were Watching God. And then I also had 2 3 stars, and that was Summer Fun and The Assassination of Margaret Thatcher. 3 stars really to me are just, I'm apathetic about the book. It's pretty mid. 2.75 was The Priory of the Orange Tree. 3.75 was Passing, and then I had a good majority of the books were 3.75 and above. Okay, so going into my physical TBR tracker, let's go ahead and look at the numbers. So I started my physical TBR with 47 books, which is a number I think is finally correct. We had to update that midway through when I realized I never included one of the books that was on my starting TBR in the spreadsheet, but 47 books was the start at May. I ended May with 39 books on my physical TBR, which made that my starting number in June. Then in June, I read 11 books that were part of my physical TBR. Again, this does not include Summer Fun, which was technically a book club book. However, I then added 8 books to my physical TBR this month. So we're not going to do that again. But that means that my physical TBR is now at 37. Overall, we have read 18 books from my physical TBR, 16 fully read, 2 DNFs, and then I added back 8. So that gives us the net impact of we're officially down 10 books. But anyway, here is a physical representation of all 12 books I read, except for The Red Pony by John Steinbeck. This stack is so heavy. Can you guys see this? I don't even know if it's in frame fully, but it is so big and so heavy. And then add The Red Pony on top of this, because I'm not going to get my big collection of short stories by John Steinbeck and add it there. The important thing is it's been a successful month with getting things read off of my physical TBR. I can feel very proud about that. Still some work to do, but we're below 40. I am happy about that, and I would like to see me read another 10 books physically in July. So make sure you're subscribed to this channel if you want to see more videos of this. Like I said, I think in the future, depending on how many books I end up getting through every month and depending on how much I have to say about those books, I might split them up into smaller episodes because I'm sure this video is already over like 2 hours long. No one's watching it, okay? I know that. No one's watching it. I have 1 subscriber and my videos have gotten a collection of like 100 views. So, not to brag. But I do make these videos mainly for myself anyway, something I can refer back to and remember, how did I feel about that book? Why did I give it this rating? Oh, that's what I said. I'm just talking to myself. I know that, but I'm having fun. All right, I'm Kiki. I've been talking about books, but now it's time to stop talking about books and go read some more.